Good morning and welcome to the Landmarks Preservation Commission's public hearing and public meeting of January 31st, 2023. This meeting is being held via Zoom and live streamed on our YouTube channel. So you may join either the Zoom meeting at the estimated time for the item that you're interested in, or you may watch the proceedings at our YouTube channel. And we are going to begin this morning with a public hearing item, and then we will move to our public meeting agenda, which has 11 items that have already had a public hearing and are returning today with revisions in response to comments made at those public hearings. And with that, I will turn it. Oh, no, I want to ask Mark Silverman, to General Counsel, to take the attendance, call the roll. So,
Chair Carroll.
Here.
Vice Chair Bland.
Here.
Commissioner Shamir Barron.
Here.
Commissioner Chapin.
Here.
Commissioner Chen.
Yeah.
Here. Commissioner Devonshire.
Here.
Commissioner Goldblum.
Here.
Commissioner Gustafson.
Here.
Commissioner Jefferson.
Here.
Commissioner Lutfi. Commissioner Holford Smith.
Here.
Okay, great. Thank you. And now we'll turn it over to our Director of Preservation, Corey Harala, to take us through our public hearing item and our public meeting agenda.
Thanks, Sarah, and good morning, everybody. We'll start today's Preservation Department agenda with public hearing item number 1, LPC 23-04408, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 856, lots 9 and 7503. 11 to 15 East 26th Street in the Madison Square North Historic District. This is a neo-Gothic style store and loft building designed by Rouse and Goldstone and built in 1912 to 13. The application is to install storefront infill, a revolving door and a marquee, remove interior lot line walls, reconstruct and alter the parapets, and install railings, construct rooftop additions, and install mechanical equipment.
Hey, Commissioners, the applicants have entered the hearing. Jeff, you now have control of the presentation. Aaron, whenever you're ready, please state your name for the record. Please unmute yourself and you may begin.
I totally would have started talking without unmuting. Good morning, Commissioners. Erin Ruley, Higgins, Quays, Barth and Partners. We are the preservation consultants for this project, and I'm joined today by Jeff Allerbrook and Danielle Aders of Moad Damris Shannon Architects. They are the project architects. We also have Chuck Van Winkle of Thornton Tomasetti, who is the engineer for the project, and Bill Feeks of Rock Rose. Rock Rose are the building owners. Jeff, could we go to the first slide? Maybe the next one. Yeah. So here you have, go back. Thanks. There you go. 11 and 15 East 26th Street. The bulk of the work is at number 11, but we will have something to talk about for number 15. They're on the north side of East 26th Street, on the north side of Madison Square, between 5th Avenue and Madison. And in the photograph on the right, you see number 11 is on your left, and number 15 is on the right. Rock Rose recently acquired number 11, and the number 15 is it has long-term commercial use there. Number 15 is a mixed-use building. The lower 8 floors are commercial. Rock Rose owns that portion of the building, and then the upper floors are converted for residential condo with separate ownership. And so the project has 2 broad goals. First, to rehabilitate and reposition number 11 and continue its commercial use, but also creating a shared set of amenities between the commercial components of both buildings. So a new shared lobby space and rooftop amenities are part of that package. Next slide. And as I mentioned, the bulk of the work is going to be at number 11, but we are making interior connections behind the street wall to create a shared lobby. So that's where number 15 comes into play. But there has been extensive change at number 11, and the base has been altered over time, as has the crown of the building. And this project restores those character defining features of both the base and the crown, and provides a proper termination for the building. And so just broadly, the scope of work at the base will be recreating the Gothic portal at the east side of the building that was removed in the 1960s. And a new sympathetic storefront infill that's inspired by the historic infill, a new revolving door and marquee, all for the contemporary office use. And then at the top of the building, the proposals to activate the rooftop. It's largely serving mechanical use at this point. And there's a proposal to restore the full height and expression of the parapet. The existing parapet is about 12 feet tall. It's very tall. And so to have active use of the rooftop, the proposal includes modifications that allow for apertures within the parapet. So there is transparency and views from within the rooftop structure. There's a small one-story occupied addition at the center of the building with very limited visibility, and new mechanical equipment, elevators, generators to serve the contemporary office space. When this project started, Thornton Tomasetti was engaged to survey the existing condition of the parapets, and what they found was unsafe conditions. It wasn't sort of part of the plan all along, but there was emergency work required to stabilize the parapet, and that required removal of a large section of the existing failing terracotta. And so everybody's it's an unfortunate amount of work, but everybody is very pleased that it was found rather than in terms of an accident. And so that work has been applied for and underway to stabilize the parapet. But the modifications we're proposing are as part of the repair of those unsafe conditions, the full restoration and modification to allow for that active use of the building. And I think, as you'll see, this is very much in the spirit of neo-Gothic architecture in the city, commercial buildings, and the transparency that's integrated at the top of buildings of this type. Next slide. Here, just a view looking across Madison Square right after the completion of the building in 1913. We see the buildings on the left. Number 11 is rising up against the corner building at Fifth Avenue. That's 225 Fifth. Gift building, it remains today. And so this condition is very much what we see today, where that side elevation of number 11 is exposed. You can see a light well at the center of the building, and then the ornamented parapet around the perimeter of the building. So as Corey mentioned, the building was constructed in 1912 to 13. Rouse and Goldstone were the architects. It's a neo-Gothic store and loft building, and it's 21 stories in height. The building to the east, number 15, is 20 stories in height, Meineke and Franken, and just a few years earlier. And of course, this is all sort of part of the evolution of tall buildings around Madison Square in the first decades of the 20th century. Next slide. So on the left is the tax photograph, and at that point, the storefront, the base of the building, and the crown are still intact. You can see the pair of at the base, the pair of portals at each side, and then the storefront in the center, and the articulated roof line. By the 1960s, there have been significant changes. The entire parapet is stripped back, and so you can see in that detail zoom on the top right, the solid panel, the quatrefoil panels at the top of the building, and then the finials are all cut down. At the base, in the 60s, the historic storefront remained. You can see that multi-light transom that extended across the center bay. And then, but at the bay to the east, you can see there's a 1960s entry surround that replaced the original neo-Gothic portal that was previously located there. Next slide. So we'll start at the storefront, and then we'll work our way up to the top of the building, and then we'll take a walk around the site to understand the visibility. Here's the existing condition. We have on the left, number 11, the existing historic neo-Gothic portal that will be replicated on the East Bay, where there's that black granite surround currently. The commission in 2018 approved a proposal here to recreate the entry surround and have contemporary infill. So that exists, but that work will be undertaken as part of this project, and the interior infill will be modified as part of this as well. The existing storefront dates to about 2012. It's also a commission-approved project for the Museum of Math, and that replaced an earlier generation of non-historic infill about 10 to 15 years ago. On the right, number 15, this is a sort of good place to understand how the building functions, but the entry with the marquee at the right is the residential entry, and that has the marquee is associated with the residential units, and then the two bays to the left are the existing commercial lobby and entry for number 15. Next slide. And here, just a close-up view of those details of the alterations. You can see on the photo on the left, the existing or the historic storefront still remained at that time. You have that multi-light transom and cast iron bulkhead. The 60s entry surround is at the right, and we see a detail of it there in its glory days. And then the photograph on the right is at the time of designation. So the infill and surround at the West Bay is intact. All new infill and bulkhead at the storefronts. So the storefronts were lost at some point between the late 60s and designation. And then, of course, that 1960s entry surround, which remains today. Next slide. In terms of inspiration, as we described the scope of work, there's a marquee proposed, and we look to some historic models, particularly those with a slim profile on commercial buildings, and a detail that related to the overall expression and the glazing above. So a sort of unified composition. And here we just see a few of those historic models. Next slide. And then in thinking about design in the context of the marquee and the entry, a couple of comparable examples that have been approved in the district. On the left, of course, is the marquee at number 15, our neighboring building. But more relevant, I think, are the two to the right, nearby examples that have a similar integrated approach to their design. So it combines sympathetic infill where no historic fabric existed, and revolving doors and entry marquee that's really part of a cohesive design approach. And that's really what we're going to be seeing today. And of course, all of this is addressing all of those contemporary needs of commercial buildings as they're repositioned in the market. And so I think here, Jeff will jump in and share with you the specifics of the design.
Great. Thank you, Erin. And thank you, commissioners, for your time this morning. Back to the existing condition, I'll just run through this quickly. As Erin stated, the conditions there today, and just for reference going forward, the red line down the middle will be the separation between 11 and 15. So the proposal, as Erin described, we will reinstate the Gothic portal to the east that was there originally. This becomes the swing doors for the entry to the lobby for 11, and then the infill for the main entry to 11 will follow the bulkhead from the historic drawings and the images that we saw. A clear story transom, a multi-light transom element at the top, and then the framing that we see on each side of the entry, the larger piers, one which actually contains a structural column to the building. To the left, these are details that we are still intact on 27th Street. So we'll use those details and profiles to set up the entry to 11 there. And then to compare images to compare the existing in the proposed here. The limestone that exists here today is intact, just dirty. So we'll clean that and keep that intact. And then here, this shows the images really mimicking the western portal that's there today. And a close-up of that. So here we can see more detail. And I'll start at the bottom here, the cast iron bulkhead. Again, this was likely louvers to the cellar at one point in time, not our proposal here, but we do like the intricate detail there, the grid. Some of that is intact on 27th Street. We'll reinstate that here based on the drawings that we have and the photography, historic photography we have. And then at the top, the multi-light transom. And then here you see the entry with similar to some of the precedent images we saw, the revolving door with canopy above. And then again, the articulated piers that we had pulled from 27th Street. The materiality follows obviously what exists. It's a deer isle granite base, very typical of this period around this part of the city. And then the limestone, which again, east or western side is intact. The cornice here is intact. And so we will bring that same limestone to this new entry. And then the cast iron metal that we're seeing, both as the cap to our piers and all of the trim that's on the storefront, canopy as well, and then the lace, the detail work here at above the entry, the swing door entry there. The next few slides go through details of different components. I'll run through these quickly. We can return to these if there are any specific questions. This first shows the revised entry from the 60s, and then the proposed Gothic arch that we're bringing back to follow the western side of the building. And then opposite of that, or just to the west of the Museum of Math entry today, it's a rather large glass infill. Here we bring back the cast iron bulkhead, the multi-light transom, and you catch part of the pier to the entry there as well. And then what is today the museum's entry, this is on center in the building, the glass cube, and the proposed here shows the revolving door marquee, and then our multi-light transom above. And a detail of the marquee, as you might recall from the precedent images there, so the intent here was to keep it thin. We like the glass pops that some of the precedent images showed to maintain some light to the entry below this. And as Aaron alluded to, part of this proposal looks to connect the lobbies from both 11 and 15. The next series of images just shows what that means from the exterior as we open up the wall between the two buildings there. So on the left is the existing plan. Again, the line here, not red this time, but the line here is the separation between 11 and 15. 11's lobby is quite small, 4 elevators there, and then 15 slightly larger. And then, as we saw in one of the initial images, the residential entry to 15 is right here on center in the building. So the proposed brings the entry to 11 on center with 11, and this becomes a primary entry for both buildings in the commercial part of 15. The residential entry on 15 remains. So it's this opening here in the wall, which are not structural, just a masonry infill that we are looking to open up. And a blow-up view of that. So as we've been talking about the stone portal that we're reinstating on 11, there's depth to that, nearly 5 feet, and then the existing stone portal that's on 15 is there as well. So together these are producing a rather deep portal between the two, or into the interior here. And then our core, which is obviously not moving, is about 12 feet back from there. And the next images here will show what that looks like from the exterior. So on the left here, standing in front of the entry on 11, this is the reinstated portal at the east side of 11. And here we see the existing entry to 15 today, and the lack of visibility through from that perspective. Here we're walking towards the east, and now we see in through both of those entry portals. And then as we move to the east, but now we're in front of 15 looking back. And so what we're seeing is the core wall in the distance through those entries there.
So I'll jump in again and give you a bit of history about the rooftop, and then we'll go through the design specific to the rooftop and parapet. As I mentioned, Jeff, maybe we can jump to the first image. We have a very tall parapet condition. It's 12 feet tall at the south facade, so the park facade, and the proposal is to take the shadow lines of the quatrefoil panels and the finials that have recessed panels within them, and create apertures and sight lines to the south. So here we have the original condition. On the left, you can see that the south elevation with the full height of the finials extant at that point, and then below that is the paired panels of quatrefoil, and you'll notice a little bit in the photo on the left, but also the photo on the right, where we see the full reveal of the west elevation, that the parapet returned historically for one bay on that west elevation. So the quatrefoil panels and the finials extend right on that corner, and then it becomes a sort of simplified sidewall condition. There are finials that extend up at the major piers, and then at that recess where the light well exists, there are no finials within that space. There's a dark area right above the parapet there. That is an existing tank room, and so that we'll see that throughout the rooftop conditions. So just as a note, it's not hard to get. The building is 300 feet tall, so it's hard to get the details from the street level here. But there is a pretty elaborate quatrefoil pattern we'll see in the existing conditions, and within each of those finials, there is a recessed panel, a reveal of sorts that deepens as it extends up toward the top of the pinnacle. So it creates a deeper shadow line as you're rising up. Next slide. The rooftop has been mostly mechanical use over time. On the left, we're looking east into the light well. At the front of the building on the right-hand side is the elevator overrun, right behind the parapet. At the center of the building is that tank room that we saw in the earlier historic photograph. And then there is another bulkhead that existed historically at the north end of the building behind the parapet. There's also, you can see an additional mechanical overruns and water tank at the north end, just behind the light well. And also a very active parapet. So that side elevation that engages at number 15 is responsive to all of those jogs and equipment enclosures on the rooftop. And so we see that.
Erin, would you mind if I interrupted just for a moment?
Sure.
The slide on the left and another one that you showed earlier have fantastic pictures of the original Madison Square Garden by Sanford White, which is
they do, and I'm sorry for not pointing that out.
That's all right. Keep going with your presentation, but I couldn't resist.
Yeah, there's that great skyline view over the park, and it's right there, front and center. Sorry for not noting that. So next slide, Jeff. By the 1940s, the top of the building starts to get cut away. On the side elevation, the finials start to disappear. And by the 1960s, the condition on the top right is essentially what's intact. This is a slightly later photo, but we know from earlier, less high quality photos that this is the condition that existed. So the parapet, all of the finials are cut down to the solid parapet level. At that time, you still see on the side elevation, you still see the steps in the side parapet. That has changed, but the finials were removed. On the bottom right, this aerial view is the current view. And so we see on the north end, we'll start, Jeff, and maybe that's the existing mechanical for the north side of the building. At the light well is that tank room, that existing tank room. And then the the elevator bulkhead at the south side of the building, you can see that that has grown. So it's now engaging the front parapet. It actually sits on top of the front parapet today. And so it's a pretty significant change. Hard to see here, but the corner of the building, that stepped parapet is cut away. And so it's down at a sort of a stable level, much lower than the front parapet. And we'll see that in detail from the rooftop. Next slide. So here is the existing condition. And so you can see starting at the top, first that side parapet that engages number 15, that's that red brick wall that you see popping up there. The existing elevator machine room that sits on top of the parapet currently, the parapet, which has been cut down and it just has like a simple metal coping today. And then the level below that, which is the quatrefoil panels, this is all part of what has to be reconstructed given the existing conditions. And we have some graphic photographs of that, but it's that all needs to be rebuilt even in the absence of this project. And here probably a good point to point out the ribs, the pier lines, and then where the finial was articulated, those recesses that exist within the finials historically. You can also catch a glimpse of where the side elevation has been cut back. Yeah, exactly. And the front facade just sort of hangs on its own, the parapet. Next slide. Just a few existing conditions photographs walking around the roof. View number 1 is looking south. So we are looking toward that 12-foot tall parapet in the distance. And on the left is the elevator enclosure that is engaging the parapet. View 3 is you're standing with the parapet to your right. So that's the full height of the existing parapet with the bulkhead resting on the parapet in the distance. Below that, number 4 is the view looking west. So this is where the side parapet has been cut back and it's just simply braced with the exposed parapet, the plane of the parapet exposed. The other 2 views, numbers 2 and 5, are the tank room, the existing tank room. It takes up basically the full width of the narrow section of the building, but on the right in view 5, you can see that narrow pathway that exists between the parapet wall and the existing tank room. Slide. So here's the scope overall in axonometric. You on the left is the existing condition. So you can see the existing tank room, the cut back parapet on the side elevation, the elevator overrun engaging the front parapet, and then of course the cut down front parapet wall. And in the proposed condition, the blue area is the proposed occupied space. So that's a small 1-story addition. And on top of that is generator enclosure, and mechanical is to the right and to the south of the occupied addition. So the approach here has been to consolidate all of this toward the center of the building, to push it back as far as we could from the front facade. And there are 2 purposes there. One is, of course, the aesthetics, having the parapet read and have legibility of the restored parapet and minimize the sight lines, but also the structural capacity. There's, because of the tank room being located in the middle of the building historically, it can carry extra load there. So there's a structural rationale for why everything is sort of located where it is. And Jeff can speak to that in depth. Next slide. And then, so finally, just talking a bit about the proposal in its stylistic context. It's, of course, neo-Gothic building. We see here just a few examples of other neo-Gothic landmarks in the city. And I think what we see in all of these is that vertical rise of the building and how each of the setbacks or terminations are expressed with sort of a complexity in ornamentation. And as the building ascends, there is transparency or lightness and fineness in detail. And You see it in the West Street. These are very many Cass Gilbert buildings, sorry. But the West Street building, Woolworth, 400 Madison. And then our neighbor just to the east of us on Madison Square, New York Life, where each of the balustrades, each of the parapets on the lower setbacks have this punctuated open work and within the balustrade, but then up at the top of the building, it becomes very light and very transparent, and you can perceive the dome, the lantern through the open parapet work. And so I think thinking about this and how it applies to this project and how it could be stylistically consistent with the proposal that to modify the existing pattern work at the top of the building as part of a larger restoration of the overall parapet. Next slide. And then finally, just the commission has seen quite a few of these proposals over the years. These are just 3 examples where interventions at the parapet have been approved. And in cases where new openings were created or where openings were infilled in those parapets. It's a sort of similar approach where you take the shadow line of the detail and be able to create openings or solid surface area in order to provide light or less light as needed for the adaptive reuse of the building. And so here we just have a few examples, 555 West End Avenue, probably the most relevant, 16th Street, where an addition is proposed behind the parapet and it's all sort of integrated into one compositional element. And then the Windermere, where the openings were modified as part of the overall proposal for reuse of that building. And I think with that, I'll pass presentation to Jeff.
Thank you again, Erin. And we'll start with, as Erin mentioned, Thornton Tomasetti is engaged with the team here and did a thorough survey of the conditions on all sides of the building. And we found on the south side, and get more photos to show this, but the area, there's a horizontal crack which continues across the face here. It corresponds with internal steel, which is also corroded. So it's this zone that has become very, very questionable, and we have the scaffold up and have begun the emergency removals with this zone. And the close-up here, we see that the piece that has disengaged entirely, but you'll notice the cracking here, which follows predominantly along the point where there's an internal structural channel, which is also quite corroded. And then we have some vertical supports that are in tough shape as well. So this is roughly about 6 feet above the roof level, which corresponds to that zone just below the quatrefoils. So the existing condition today, again, it's this zone, the horizontal cracking here and everything above that, which has been, which is in a difficult shape. And that's where we're looking to get the removals moving. But as you'll see, all the finials in the slight recess that Erin mentioned here, obviously these continued up another 5 feet. All that has been chopped off and capped with a metal coping today. And here's that bulkhead that's engaged with the facade. The image down in the left is down on the right, sorry, is the mock-up that we have done on the rooftop for all the extension of the finials and the parapet, and then all the rooftop additions. I do want to just note that the little green line we're seeing here, it is set back from the face of the parapet today, just due to some structural complications in the state of the parapet today. So that green element is actually about 5.5 feet above. It would project out to the face of the finial. So it's set back slightly due to the conditions. And the section here shows that channel that we saw with the hand coming through, and that basically corresponds where that larger crack has taken place across the elevation there. So with the emergency removals and then the proposal to bring, to reinstate the parapet as we all saw it originally, and following with some of the precedent images from our neighbors and elsewhere in the city, and just giving the neo-Gothic ethos of the building, this repair work, we're looking to bring in some of the apertures at the quatrefoil and at the finials themselves. So this would open up to the rooftop area beyond allowing light and visibility through. Just to clarify, today this is terracotta. We're looking to come back with terracotta with these elements. However, the quatrefoil details here would be a cast metal with glass behind for that glass would be operable for cleaning, but also just from stopping anything passing through these elements. Cast metal will be painted to match the terracotta. And so the red line is showing really what we can maintain and restore below, and then the elements above that do need to be replaced. And the view in the lower right here shows how from the park that would look like. And a more detailed view of one of the typical quatrefoils and the finials there and how the pieces of the openings are working. And then a view from the rooftop. So as Aaron mentioned, that today the parapet stops here. It's roughly 12 feet above the existing roof. We are elevating a portion of the roof just to get some of the roof is in tough shape and it cannot really be used for walking. So we're elevating part of that. And then here we can see the openings of what the quatrefoils and the finials as well and how that would relate. And this is that western corner, which as we saw is completely gone today. So again, we would reinstate that based on the historic documentation with the added apertures. So the next series of images are elevations and sections and generally looking from the west. The top one will be the existing conditions, and the bottom image will show the proposed. So the western side today, again, there's a lot of repair work over time, different color brick and things. And you can see here at the southwest corner, the parapet was completely removed. This is the mechanical bulkhead that today is engaging that parapet, which we're looking to remove. And you can see the absence of the finials that were once there, and even the tops of these were removed. So with this work, and I'm focused on the elevation or the masonry and terracotta portion here, we reinstate southwest corner with the extended finials, including the aperture on these three quatrefoils, and then extend the finials back to the historic height across the west facade. The stair bulkhead here has lost one of its finials. We will bring that back. And then similarly down to the north corner, we would reinstate those finials to the original height. In the distance, we're seeing the additions, and I'll go to the next slide, which shows that in section a bit clearer. So top view is a section through the roof today. As we see it again, that machine room is engaged in the facade. The tank room, which to clarify Aaron's comment there are three 65,000 gallon tanks there, and the building structure is very robust through the center of the building due to that. So that became an obvious spot for us to bring in some of the new mechanical components that the building needs. And then the proposed view below, we'll see the elevated roof there. The roof pavilion, which is an amenity for the office tenants in the building, both for 11 and 15. And then above that, the generator enclosure. And there's actually two generators in here. Given our proximity to the residential, both at 15 and the gift building just to the west of us, there are the code for noise requirements here is quite substantial. So these are generators with acoustic enclosures, and so it may look larger than what we're all used to for emergency backup generators. And then here's a section through the existing tank room and then our proposed addition here. And so we can see today where the elevator machine room pops up above the slab at the roof, just the elevator overrun. Now with our addition for an occupied space, we're bringing two elevators up to that roof level, which inherently increases the overrun and machine room height there. Again, the tank rooms, these are the three large tanks, and then the two generators proposed that would sit on top of that, the rooftop addition. And you'll see the relative scale to the reinstated parapet here. Now a section looking south through this sort of the pinch point in the roof where the tank room, the tanks exist today. And we want to show this as, we saw a corner of this from, I think, 24th Street, one of those views down on from street level, and really understanding what the visibility of that as it exists today and how we could shape the addition to really limit how much we're looking at there. So the thicker dash line here represents that paint cream as it exists today. And you'll see how we've been trying to sculpt that addition so that we were not extending beyond, above that from certain vantage points. Again, this is the generator with the acoustical enclosure above that there. And then we're focused on been focused on the rooftop here. Just want to kind of reset the scale of this. We're roughly just under 300 feet above street level here. And so the two diagrams here on the left is the existing condition and then our proposed, which illustrates where new elements are being brought up to the roof.
Great, Jeff, perfect. Let's move on to the first slide. I'll move through these visibility studies very quickly. We'll take a walk around the park. The format for all of this is the mock-up on the left, a rendered view on the right, and then there's a zoomed in detail for your benefit to understand what we're seeing. All of this is again happening 300 feet above street level, so it's quite hard to understand. But I think also because of that, it makes the impact very minimal. What we do see is primarily mechanical visibility. And of course, that's all set back behind the restored parapet. So this view from Fifth Avenue, right outside of the park, here all we're seeing is the restored parapet and some glass railings on that west elevation. Next slide. Within the park at sort of its center point, again, it's just that restored parapet. You get a very minimal line of the elevator overrun that you see in the zoomed in view, but from street level, not perceptible really. Next slide. Stepping back in the park, we have the elevator overrun that you see on the right. So it's two of those elevators are being extended for the rooftop. The other two remain at the existing level. These are set back behind that restored parapet. Next slide. Here, you have broad views thanks to the lovely park that's in front of the building. But if you were to zoom in, you would see elevator overrun and a section of the generator. This is the first view of the generator that you're getting. But again, it's lost in that sort of context of the tall buildings in the distance and really recedes in and joins in with that skyline. Next slide. Another view about 4 blocks away. Similarly, here you're just seeing the elevator overrun. So this is the lower section of the overrun plus the taller section. Next slide. A view from around 23rd Street. Here we're seeing the elevator overrun on the right and the generator all behind the restored parapet. And then moving, I think we moved to the north a little bit here, right? So here we start to get a glimpse of the generator and the railings on the south elevation, as well as the elevator overrun. Next slide. So this is one of the 2 views where you have any visibility of the occupied addition. So in that light well behind the railing, you're going to see a little bit of the occupied addition, maybe. And then above that is the generator and the glass railings and restored parapet all around the perimeter of the building. Next slide. This slide, this is where you sort of see all the components of the project, but in a very minimal way. It's a very limited viewpoint. You have the glass railings and the restored parapet on the south elevation and west elevation, sorry. The occupied addition in the light well and the generator above, and to the right is the glimpse of the elevator overrun. And then this is the final view, and this is from 27th Street. And what we're seeing here is the glass railing and a portion of the generator. And the dark sort of existing volume there is on an adjacent or a nearby building on Madison Avenue, number 41 Madison. So that's an existing rooftop accretion that is not associated with the project, right? It's existing. And so commissioners, I think we'll leave it there, but I hope what you see here is a thoughtful and balanced approach that restores the base of the building, really reconnects it to the storefront, to the overall building, and reinvigorates the reading of that soaring verticality of the building. So with that, we'll take any questions.
Great, thank you very much. All right, commissioners, do we have any questions? Okay, yes, Commissioner Jefferson, please go ahead.
Yes, one question about the secondary facade. Is the stainless steel flue to remain that you see? Or am I missing?
Yes, you're speaking of this exhaust here.
Yeah, that's
It's actually from the neighboring property. It's, I believe, a restaurant exhaust which extends up to above the roof of our building. But that would stay.
Thank you.
Okay, and one quick question about the revolving doors at the bottom. Can you go back to the existing storefront? The MoMath storefront that the commission approved projects beyond the building line, correct?
Sorry, I'm not trying to make everyone dizzy here.
That's okay.
Maybe in plan is the best place.
Yeah. So I'm looking at where your revolver is. Where is the existing MoMath storefront?
The exist would be right here. So that glass plane is the same.
It doesn't project.
I think it projects, Jeff. Yeah, go to the existing.
Oh, I'm
comes
sorry.
out.
Yes. So the base follows. It does. Okay.
see.
Got it. Sorry.
Okay.
It jogs, right? Yeah.
It jogs. Okay. But still behind the face of the piers.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. And if you were to slip the revolving doors back a little, do you then have a complicated circulation on the inside? Does that sort of complicate the access to the door on the left or the interior door?
It does. The desk is right here. Again, the core is just cropped off here. So the circulation is very tight. So to extend the door in, it does start to jam up everything. The building, for whatever reason, is actually set back from the property line, like about 2 feet. So we're not projecting beyond that. And I do want to note that the gift building to the west actually has steps that come out. That come out over 5 feet.
Okay, that project even deeper than
Correct.
your okay. And of course your marquee will also help the doors to feel more receptive.
Right.
All right. Any other questions? Okay, let's move to public testimony. If you're in the meeting and would like to speak on this item, please raise your hand so we can identify you. And as with all public hearing items, we start with anyone who signed up in advance, and then we'll get to everyone else. And but whether or not you signed up in advance, please raise your hand so we can find you either way. And I will turn it over to Gregory Kalla to take us through the testimony.
Thank you, Chair Carroll. We received a couple of signups in advance, so we'll be going through those first. The first signup was Lucy Levine from Historic Districts Council. So Lucy, I will be promoting you to panelist now. And if you could please state your name for the record and unmute your line, you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Good morning, commissioners. My name is Lucy Levine. I'm speaking on behalf of the Historic Districts Council. HDC finds this application for a facade restoration to be appropriate, elegant, and very well done. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for that. And next up, we'll be hearing from Jeremy Woodoff from VSNY. So I will be promoting you to panelist now. And if you could please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Hello, Jeremy Woodoff, are you with us?
Yes, I think I am now.
Yes, hi, we can hear you.
Okay. 1 second, please. Okay. Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Jeremy Woodoff, speaking for the Victorian Society, New York. Founded in New York City in 1966, the Victorian Society in America is dedicated to fostering the appreciation and preservation of our 19th and early 20th century heritage. The New York chapter promotes preservation of our historic districts, individual landmarks, interiors, and civic art. Despite the lengthy presentation, the VSNY is pleased to express our support for the proposed alterations at the ground floor and roof of 11 to 15 East 26th Street. We will not be commenting on the third portion of the work, which is all interior and which we believe will have no significant effect. We fully support the removal of the modern storefront infill. The existing material is almost a textbook example of a mismatched and misguided alteration. The proposed ground floor infill will closely replicate the historic bulkhead, display window, and multi-light transom still in place on the 27th Street facade and seen in the historic photos. The central entrance and marquee, while not original, are modestly scaled and will reinforce the symmetry of the facade. They're also similar to historic entrances found on buildings of this age and type. This work, along with the restoration of the neo-Gothic door surround, approved in part in an earlier C of A, will be a great improvement not only of this building, but also of the historic district. At the roof, we find that the proposed enlargement of the bulkhead is modestly scaled and detailed. It will be set well back from the parapets with minimal visibility from any public way, or more importantly, from Madison Square Park. The restoration of the parapet finials using real terracotta will greatly enhance this building's historic neo-Gothic skyline. Those new spiky finials will also help obscure the enlarged roof bulkhead. Our only question concerns the glass panels set behind the painted metal grillwork in the parapet below the terracotta finials. These are shown on drawing 38. These metal panels appear to have openings in the grillwork. Will those glass panels be hinged to allow maintenance workers to remove leaves and other trash, which will inevitably be trapped behind the painted metal grillwork? Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you so much. And let me see, I do not see any further hands raised. So I will just note for the record that Manhattan Community Board 5 recommends denial unless the applicant agrees to both remove the proposed marquee from the renovation plans and make efforts to restore the parapet consistent with the original design and material. Thank you, Chair Carroll.
Okay, thank you. All right, so I'd like to turn back to the team and ask if you'd like to respond to the comments and questions we've heard.
Sure. I think just briefly, Chair, the painted metal panels. So the quatrefoils within the panelized system in the parapet are proposed to be cast metal, and the glazing is exactly for the purpose as the Victorian Society suggested. So they are hinged and operable, so we can clean it, but it allows for protected openings because they exceed what you could have as open space per code. So it's a sort of sandwich of a operable window and the metal quatrefoil, which we think can get very good details and thinness the way that the terracotta would be articulated. And then also provide that sort of practical service of being able to maintain the condition of the opening. And then just to touch on the community board resolution, it is our understanding based on the conversation that Community Board 5 will disapprove any marquee that's proposed within their jurisdiction, regardless of the design. So I think that is their standing position these days. And we, of course, believe that it's a subject of appropriateness, the restoration and modification of the parapet, and that one can achieve a balance of restorative and contemporary intervention to provide for the new use at the roof.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, commissioners, do we have any final questions? All right, I'm going to send you all a request to unmute so that we can move along to our discussion. Okay, Commissioner Shamir Baron, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Thank you. And Commissioner Chapin, would you second that motion?
second,
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
aye,
Any opposed? Okay, the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion. And so we're looking at alterations to 15 and on the exterior at the ground floor to accommodate a new lobby, and that involves completing the restoration of the portal on the right, and then the new infill, which is based on the historic detailing or evocative of historic detailing with the marquee, and then the rooftop addition, mechanical equipment, and reconstruction of the parapet to restore the finials and provide the openings of the quatrefoils. So we'll start with Commissioner Holford Smith. Would you like to start this one?
Sure. I think in general, this is an excellent application. I think it'll go a long way to restoring the original feeling of this building, some of which has been lost over time. Start with the storefront. I think what they're proposing is appropriate based on what exists on 27th Street, which looks to be, I'm just looking at the details now, it appears that they're going to be copying the cast iron detailing from 27th Street, including the upper transom. I think that the marquee is well scaled and simple, and I can find it appropriate. And I think given the other projections of the storefront and the undulations basically of the ground floor plane, that the projecting revolving door, I think it's appropriate that it projects out the way it does. I applaud the replication of the new building entrance in cast iron and limestone. That'll be fabulous. And I think that the parapet, introduction of glass behind the quatrefoil, is a really inventive way to bring back the parapet and also allow that space to be used for public use, which it, was never designed for. And let me think what else there is.
And I guess we should also comment on the new opening, into the interior opening to combine the two lobbies.
Yes. I don't know that you'll perceive that greatly from the exterior. And I think with the other work that's being done, that I can find that appropriate as well.
Great, thank you. And I think it is framed out so that it really will read as more of a door opening. And then as the applicant showed, the facade is so deep. I think you're right that it'll be hard to perceive that as anything other than a glimpse of an opening, a door opening, doorway opening. Okay, Commissioner Goldblum.
Yeah, I agree with everything Ann said. I think it's an exemplary project. I see no reason to oppose it at all. It's the rooftop addition is minimally visible at a great distance, and basically it's a very restorative project. Kudos.
Great, thanks. Commissioner Devonshire.
Yeah, I agree as well. The only concern that I have that it was sort of not mentioned what the cast metal is going to be at the parapet. I'm assuming it's going to be aluminum though, and I think the applicant needs to go to great lengths to make sure that the sheen on the painted finish of the quatrefoils matches the glaze of the adjacent terracotta.
Okay, great. And we can have the staff review samples of that as well. Okay, Commissioner Chen.
Yeah, I'm in total agreement with all the comments because this is really a nice project, restorative. I think it's very appropriate and well done.
Thank you. Vice Chair Bland.
It's always great when Ann Holford Smith goes first.
Well, thanks, Fred.
That should be the tradition from now on.
And then when Commissioner Goldblum comes in and says exemplary, he steals my word there too. So all I can do is say, it's been said, I think this is a wonderful project and I agree with all of it as presented.
Commissioner Lutfi.
I don't think she's
You're
here.
muted.
Oh,
You're
she's
muted.
here.
Tony.
I'm always remuting myself. Sorry about that, but I agree wholeheartedly that this project is very, very well done in every way. And I gave a second thought to your question to Anne about the perceptibility of how the combination of the two buildings looked. I mean, it's hard for us to know from now, but when you just look at this particular image, the applicant did such a good job of making sure that not only there was restoration done to this building, but that the two are so differentiated that I think it's absolutely fine. And the same holds true for the visibility of the new additions on the roof. It's a great project.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Jefferson?
I agree with my commissioners, a great project. I think it's well thought through, and particularly the detailing of the quadrifoil. It's very well done.
Commissioner Gustafson?
Yeah, to quote HDC, appropriate, elegant, and well done. Nothing more to say.
Okay. Commissioner Shamir Baron?
I agree with everything that's been said. It's a beautiful project and appropriate.
Thank you. All right, Commissioner Holford Smith, would you make the motion?
Yes. In the matter of LPC 23-04408, 11 to 15 East 26th Street, Madison Square North Historic District, a Neo-Gothic style store and loft building designed by Rouse and Goldstone and built 1912-1913. The application is to install storefront infill, a revolving door and a marquee, remove interior lot line walls, reconstruct and alter the parapets, and install railings, construct rooftop additions, and install mechanical equipment. I note that the building's style, scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Madison Square North Historic District. I recommend approval, finding that the proposed work will not damage, eliminate, or conceal any significant historic fabric, that the design of the proposed black finished metal storefront infill will feature materials, details, profiles, and finishes, and be of a configuration that recalls aspects of the historic infill that existed at this facade and which remains at the East 27th Street facade. That the presence of revolving doors within the storefront infill is consistent with historic and modified storefront infill found in buildings of this type within the historic district. That the proposed black finished metal and glass marquee will be anchored to the building at the modern storefront infill and will be well scaled to the building and will be in keeping with the simple designs of modern marquees installed at buildings of a similar age and style found elsewhere within the historic district. That only a portion of the interior lot line wall will be removed and that separate entrances will be maintained, thereby retaining the character of each building as an individual structure. That the East 26th Street parapet is in a deteriorated condition, which warrants its reconstruction. That the proposed alterations to the decorative parapets, in conjunction with the recreation of missing features, will bring the silhouette closer to its historic appearance and be in keeping with the open quality of parapets found at buildings of the same style. That due to their location at the top of the 21-story building, and because they will feature a painted finish that will help blend with the adjacent terracotta, the proposed change in material of the quatrefoils from terracotta to metal will not be perceptible from public thoroughfares. That the proposed glass railings behind the Gothic parapets will not be perceptible when seen from public thoroughfares, and that the proposed glass railings on the secondary facade parapets will only be seen at a distance over secondary facades. That the proposed rooftop additions will simplify the building's roofscape, which includes an already visible tank room and elevator bulkhead set directly against the East 26th Street parapet. That the majority of the bulk being added at the roof will be concentrated away from the primary facades, that the materiality and finishes of the additions, featuring terracotta and metal cladding and a neutral color palette, will be in keeping with finishes and materials typically found at rooftop accretions at buildings of this type, style, and age, and will help them to recede from view. that the generator and related screening will be simply designed with a neutral finish and will be set back from the facade to help it remain a discrete presence, and that the rooftop additions and mechanical equipment will only be visible over the primary East 26th Street facade at a distance.
Oops, thank you very much. Commissioner Goldblum, would you second that motion?
Second.
And Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Barron,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Devonshire,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi,
Aye.
Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
With 11 in favor, none opposed, the motion passes.
All right, that's approved. Thank you. We look forward to seeing the work happen here and the great restoration.
Thanks,
Right, well,
commissioners.
Thanks.
you all.
We'll now move to our public meeting agenda.
Okay, we'll start with public meeting item number 1, LPC 22-09533. This is an application for an amendment. It's in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 40, Lot 3, 60 Wall Street. A postmodern style office tower designed by Roche Dinkaloo and built in 1985 to 89 pursuant to a special permit under zoning resolution section 74-79, which found a harmonious relationship between this building and the individual landmark at 55 Wall Street, a Greek revival style exchange building designed by Isaiah Rogers and built in 1842, with an addition designed by McKim, Mead and White and built in 1907. Again, the application is to amend CR 85-004, LPC 84-0715 to alter the base of 60 Wall Street. This was last presented at the public meeting of September 20th, 2022. No action was taken at that time. The applicants are here to present revisions to the proposal after we open the proceedings.
Okay, great. And let's do that right now. Commissioner Devonshire, would you make a motion to open the proceedings?
So moved.
Thank you. And Vice Chair Bland, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, the applicants may speak.
Great. And we do have a presentation, but I can get started while that's getting set up. So thank you for having us. My name is Melanie Myers. I am a partner at Fried Frank Heritage Driver and Jacobson, representing the applicant. I think as indicated, this is a follow-up to public hearings and meetings held in June and September of last year regarding proposed changes to the facade of the building located at 60 Wall Street. As you know, 60 Wall received a special permit from the City Planning Commission in the 1980s that allowed for the transfer of development rights from the landmark 55 Wall Street. And as part of that special permit process, the commission commented on the harmonious relationship between 60 Wall Street and 55 Wall. So at the September meeting, we heard a number of comments from different commissioners. And while the comments varied, we heard them in three general themes. First, that the existing colonnade of 60 Wall Street, its materiality and its mass were important elements for maintaining the harmonious relationship with 55 Wall. Second, we heard comments that there should be a better integration of the design of the base and the tower above. And third, we heard a suggestion that the architects really look to changes in the rear wall, the secondary wall of the arcade, and to the window openings at the upper levels of the base to address the project goals of bringing more light and air into the building. So the application that KPF will be presenting today, we believe directly responds to these comments. In particular, the colonnade and the stonework at the third story of the base are maintained in their entirety, as is the treatment and profile of the mechanical floor at the fifth level. The changes that are being proposed are limited to the rear facade of the arcade area to create a cleaner backdrop to the colonnade and to bring more light and air into the base of the building. Changes to the window treatment at the third story of the building within the existing stone frames, and the creation of larger window openings at the setback fourth floor to allow more light and air in that area. So the revised design leaves all of the elements referenced by the commission in its original harmonious relationship report intact And as noted previously, we believe responds to what we heard with the commissioners. So pleased to be able to present this with you. And I will now turn it over to Hugh Trumbull of KPF to walk through the design. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, good morning. Trying to move the slide forward. Oh. Little delay, sorry. Here we are looking down on the site from aerial view. You see the importance of 60 Wall Street and its relationship to 55. It's very much in a neighborhood which is tight in the street configuration, referred to as kind of cracked mud in that area, and the relationship between tower and base is somewhat severed in the perspective of things. We have presented to you a number of times. In these 4 images, the top represents the existing condition, and then the 2 on the left were earlier submissions that we had and we discussed with you. And upon the commission's suggestions, we have come back, as Melanie has stated, with a new podium proposal, and that is to keep the loggia pretty much as it is today. This is our proposal zoomed in kind of in an elevated perspective, looking across from 55, which is to our back. Looking into the building, you see that we are retaining the full loggia and the architrave that runs across the top. We are also interested in the 4th floor, which is just above the cornice line there and not seen so much in this image. What is important to us is that we reposition this building so that we have wonderful light into the interior. The existing condition is starved for 3 trading floors. That's the 4th, 3rd, and 2nd floor. The 4th is above the cornice, the 3rd is within the entablature, and the 2nd is just below within the top of the loggia. We also want to make sure that we have a lot more light coming into the lobby, but most importantly, we want to really re-energize the public space, the covered pedestrian way, to have a lot more light. And that has been a big goal of this project and what we hope to bring to the community. Looking at the building kind of from above, looking at the podium, we have removed the 2 forward buildings, one of them 55, so that you can see the full extent of the work that we are doing. Starting at the sort of base of things, we are keeping the full colonnade in place. All of the existing freestanding columns are to be retained in their natural and their current state. We are putting behind that in the secondary facade or the storefront a new high performance glass facade with shadow piers that mirror the columns in the front. That rises up to the 2nd floor and then through to the 3rd floor in the entablature. We are repositioning new windows. We're taking out a dark tinted glass window with lots of mullions in it and replacing it with a larger window. And then on the 4th floor terrace, as you've seen before in the earlier images, you don't typically see that from the street. We're also engaging in and opening up the openings there and putting in large windows. Above that, you see a series of terraces that we potentially look to inhabit. And then above that, you can kind of see the overall tower coming down. At the center stage within the tower is a flush glass facade with glass spandrels. To its flanking sides are flush glass with a flush stone spandrel. And then down below is the articulated, more postmodern facade of the podium that comes down. So I will go into more detail on some of the pieces that we're looking at, but to look at the plan and in detail, you can see at the top of the page the existing position. The columns are all retained from the previous design, and then in the new design we are carrying through the shadow piers from before and replacing it with a high performance facade. As we go through a series of black and white drawings, here the existing showing the podium and its definition. The earlier proposals were a complete renovation of the stone facade all the way up to the 5th floor and the mechanical at this line that you see here. We came back to you with some variations of that and some more detailing. And then upon your comments, we come back to you today with this new proposal, which keeps almost all of the existing stonework of the podium on the front facade intact. There are some of the larger windows here on the 4th floor terrace that have been employed, and then a new performance facade behind in the secondary surface of the loggia. The existing condition, as you see it today, this now rendered with the buildings in the foreground removed so that you can see the full extent of the facade, and then the new proposal. You can see here that the colonnade and the column spacing has been kept as it is today, allowing the sort of central figure to come down and mark the entrance into the building on the center axis. Over to the left, you can see the opening, larger windows that lead to the public space. In regards to the materiality of the building, there's a Verde Laguna granite as some detail accent stones. And then the major granite that's being used is the Monderitz. We will be using the Monderitz for our shadow piers, replacing it in a sense in kind with the columns that are in the foreground. We are complementing that with a bronze finished metal that defines all of the window treatment, and then a new giallo ornamental granite on the paver that runs from the interior to the exterior. Looking at the detailing of the existing condition on the 4th floor terrace, you see these very small windows, and it's one of the problems that we have with the building is that it's hard to lease the trading floor that's on this level. These apertures with its tinted black glass and small windows make it virtually a very dark room behind it. And as well, on the 3rd floor, there are some very substantial mullions and black tinted glass that also make the 3rd floor quite dark. So we're replacing those with a new larger pane glass with a shadow reveal that floats the glass and gives a wonderful depth to the definition. It allows the stone to return back and be present on the perspective. And we have a detail here to show you some of those that concern. So we wanted to make sure that the stone returned and that you could see the depth of the existing facade, but we also wanted to make sure that we got quality light into the space. So by having the glass pulled to the front surface, we get a clean sill and allows us to reflect more ambient light into the interior and elevate the lighting levels on the trading floor. As we look to the facade on the outside, the existing condition rendered here, standing beside 50 Wall Street, looking back towards the building, and then its new proposal, very similar, but now you can see the high performance facade and the secondary surfaces that are in the back that will allow a lot more light into the public space and more civic engagement of people on the street and people in the public space. Up above, you can see the windows there, and then on the 4th floor terrace, virtually impossible to see from this perspective. As we move to Hanover Street, this is the one time when the 4th floor terrace windows can be seen. You can see the black tinted glass windows. They're small format sizes here. In our new repositioned window, we mirror the windows from the 3rd floor up to the 4th floor. and we allow for a larger window. This is virtually the only place that fourth floor window can be seen from the street level. And we're allowing for a kind of greater view into the public space on that axis. Now we have moved around, looking to the west. You can see the existing facade, the detailing of the heavy postmodern stonework, that all stays intact, with a new window in our proposal being placed in the third floor and then within the loggia on the secondary surface behind. And then lastly, moving around to 55, there, taking the cross at 60, you can see the relationship between the two facades and the detailing of the existing condition, and then the changes to it, which are very, very minor in this perspective and barely noticeable. With all of that, I think we are very excited to bring to you our proposal. We are very committed to making the public space more present to the street, and we think that it will be a benefit to the community and to the neighborhood here at Wall Street. With that, I will hand the floor back to the chair.
Thank you very much. All right, commissioners, do we have any questions? All right, I don't see any questions, so I think we can move toward our discussion. I do want to note that we received letters from Councilmember Marte, Community Board 1, Historic Districts Council, Docomomo, Abney, Building and Construction Trades Council, REBNY, Local Union 79 and 94, SEIU, 32BJ, Center for an Urban Future, District Council 9, New York Electrical Contractors Union, Union Brotherhood of Carpenters and Joiners of America, and 7 individuals. And all of these letters were made available to the commissioners in advance of today's public meeting. So, as you know, 60 Wall Street was constructed with development rights from 55 Wall Street that were granted in a special permit under zoning resolution section 7479. And at that time, LPC issued a report to the City Planning Commission in support of the application for the special permit, finding that there was a harmonious relationship between 60 Wall Street and 55 Wall Street. And in addition, that there was a preservation plan for the individual landmark at 55 Wall Street. And the current application, as you know, is to amend the previous commission report to the City Planning Commission to alter the base of 60 Wall Street. And we are being asked to determine whether the changes to 60 Wall Street result in a facade design that maintains a harmonious relationship with 55 Wall Street. This is not a designated building, so we will not be reviewing the design under our usual appropriateness standard. This is also not a designation proposal. So we should focus our comments today on the question before us, which is whether or not the changes result in a facade that can maintains the harmonious relationship with 55 Wall Street. So as the proposal, as it was initially presented in June and in September in 2022, involved replacing the base of the building with a new design. And as you know, and as you've heard at the initial hearing and subsequent meeting, the commissioners present felt that the new base did not have a harmonious relationship with 55 Wall Street in terms of its design, its materials, and the lack of design relationship between the base and the tower of the building above. And further, many commissioners suggested keeping the existing base and modifying it, including in particular the window wall, to achieve the goals of the project. And so the applicants have returned today with a proposal that does that. They are retaining the existing base of the building and the plane of the inner wall and replacing the inner walls with large windows and entrances to create a more continuous glazing system. And they're also maintaining the existing inner column piers and introducing stone piers in similar locations to the existing stone piers. and replacing the windows at the third and fourth floors to accommodate the change in use from a trading floor to a more traditional office use that needs more light. And as has also been presented, the original report to the City Planning Commission found that the base of the building at the time related to 55 Wall Street in that the colonnaded base conformed to and was integrated into the street wall on Wall Street and related to 55 Wall Street, and that the height, rhythm, massing, and materials of the colonnade and the materials of the overall base related well to the scale and materials of 55 Wall Street. And so looking to the changes that they're proposing today, I believe the applicants have been very responsive. They're basically keeping that colonnaded base that was focused on in the relationship to 55 intact. And they're working within that to accommodate the goals of this project. The colonnade height, rhythm, design still will relate to 55 Wall Street. It will still be integrated into the context of Wall Street. And the stone material will not have changed and therefore is complementary still to 55 Wall Street. With respect to the changes they are proposing to the inner wall, its replacement will be in the same plane as the existing and will recall certain aspects of the original design. It will continue to remain as a secondary reading behind the columns. And along with the new windows at the third and fourth floors, it won't stand out in the narrow oblique views on Wall Street, which is where one can see this facade in conjunction with 55 Wall Street. And so I believe that these changes do not alter the relationship between the two facades and maintain the harmonious connection that we required in our original review, and therefore this proposal is in keeping with the intent of that proposal. So let's move on to Commissioner Goldblum, which I know you were at both the public hearing and the public meeting, and in both previous presentations, you felt that the design was not harmonious with 55 Wall Street, and specifically in its porosity and details, and further that creating the new base didn't relate to the upper floors, and that in itself was disharmonious with 55 because it created this third entity that didn't relate to either 55 or 60 Wall Street. So what are your thoughts today now that they're keeping the colonnade and base intact?
Well, I think that it's appropriate. I think that it's kind of, I always feel bad when I see projects like this where the applicant feels that the way to go is to basically surrender. And I mean, they were trying to do something very creative, and I feel bad that it didn't work, but it didn't work. And I think that the reason that it didn't work is, as you summarized my thoughts, for me anyway, it kind of presented a third element, which was neither harmonious with its original or with the building to which it is meant to be harmonious. You know, I mean, I think and hope that there are out there solutions that would have allowed them to update and improve the appearance of 55, which I'm not a big fan of, while kind of synthesizing both with it and with the landmark building better. But that's not what's being presented to us, and therefore it's not relevant. I think that the aspects of 55 that purportedly made it harmonious with 60, whatever I might feel about that relationship, are maintained, and therefore the project should be deemed, in my view, appropriate. The modifications are minor. The opening up of the inner wall and the kind of creation of columns there to match the ones on the other side, I think is perfectly logical and only enhances the existing building. I think that the modification to the windows at the clear story will actually enhance the connection to 60 Wall by making those windows, instead of holes that are recessed, by having them to look. This view is a little bit deceptive in that I think that the reflections on that glass, when it's placed flush with the face of the stone, will make that frieze look more solid, which I think is one of the main characteristics of 60 Wall, are those very muscular horizontals that play against the columns.
Hey, Michael,
Yeah.
Michael,
Oop.
I just want to make sure you're saying 60, you're saying 55.
Oops.
So you're,
I'm sorry,
you're
I got
talking
it- I
about
got it
60,
backwards.
just so it's all clear.
I
Okay.
got it backwards, sorry. So anyway, so I think it's appropriate as presented.
Okay, great. Or that there is still a harmonious relationship.
Correct. All right.
Okay, and Commissioner Devonshire, you were also at both the public hearing and the meeting, and I think you felt both times the base did not relate. Well, actually, the first time you felt that it didn't relate harmoniously, and you even suggested at that time that they do exactly what they're proposing now, modify the inner wall to create more light. At the last public meeting, you felt that they had come a long way with the new design to be more, and that it was more harmonious. But now that they've actually done what you initially suggested, how are you feeling about the proposal and the details of it?
Well, what if I change my mind?
Just reminding you.
What? All I can say now is bullseye. The relationship is harmonious. I can approve this completely.
Great, thank you. Okay, and Commissioner Lutfi, you were also at both public meetings, and you did express sympathy with the goals of the project, but also were a little concerned about the relationship of the base to the top of the building. I think you were more supportive of the second scheme, but we're now at a place where we're keeping the original base. So how are you feeling at this point?
I'm feeling so great. Because the prior scheme wasn't perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but as you said, I was and remain very sympathetic with the goals of the project. I think they are legitimate and necessary to be able to achieve in any market, but especially in the current business and office market in the city, and given actually the way that, do you hear that noise in the background? That's why I'm always muting myself. So given how tight the street grid is downtown, I think it's an even bigger issue and a bigger challenge. And then of course the greater challenge was this harmonious relationship that needed to be maintained, which absolutely has happened here. And I want to applaud the applicant for coming back yet again. And this time, I don't actually view it as a surrender. I view it as a continued, very, sort of turning yourself inside out to figure out how this could work. And Michael Devonshire, you might have helped them. Thank you very much. But now I feel like, this idea of the double colonnade was super smart, and they're a real present but masked, especially in the view that we see before us. And what was done on the third and fourth levels with the windows was also very smart. It doesn't get in the way in terms of the relationship between these two buildings, but it helps the applicant achieve its goals. And I am hugely happy with what they accomplished in terms of the the porousness and engagement with the street in terms of the glass wall at the base. So I approve that. I can approve this.
Okay, great. Thank you. Right, and Commissioner Jefferson, you also had concerns that the design of the base was too light and needed depth and shadows and a powerful colonnade. And also, I think, suggested that they could make the facade behind the columns more transparent, but you weren't comfortable with replacing it at that time. So let's hear your thoughts about this now.
So my thoughts are as follows. Building base renovation, curtain wall is appropriate. Punch windows opening enlarge, appropriate. And horizontal windows, removal of vertical mullions, appropriate. And the essential character of this base remains intact. So they did a very good job.
Okay, thank you. Right, and Commissioner Gustafson, I think you also felt that understood their goals, but felt there were many ways to achieve the goals, but the design at the time did not create a harmonious relationship. And so where are you now?
And I think they did exactly that. They achieved their goals and maintained the harmonious relationship. I think I don't really have to go into as much depth as others did looking at this view. And if you toggle back and forth between 24 and 25, I think it would be difficult for me to find that it was not harmonious, which is to say the change is this is the major view and of the two buildings together. And if you go back and forth, you'll see there's almost no visible change in that major view. Now, we could toggle back and forth between 12 and 13, 18, 19, 20, 21, et cetera. They all give you different views, but this is the one that matters. And there's, it's hardly noticeable, the change. So it is definitely absolutely harmonious.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, and Commissioner Shamir Baran, you also had concerns about the lightness of the base and its relationship to 55, and also indicated that you could support modifying the window wall behind the colonnade to be more transparent.
Yes. So I like others, think that this proposal does achieve a harmonious relationship with 55. And the issue that's not spoken that I think was difficult before is it was very, very hard to simply focus on this kind of what we were supposed to do, which was determine the appropriateness and extent to which there was a harmonious relationship between the two buildings, the two facades, because there was another elephant in the room, and that had to do with the retention, the preservation, the recognition of the value or the reality of the postmodern design of 60. And and I think now that they have retained the colonnade, the design, the originally sort of designed piers, we can, that story is set aside and dealt with, even if it's not allowed to be kind of spoken. And now we can move on, or I can move on to harmoniousness, which is absolutely expressed here, sort of retained, but in a sense elevated, because there really was an original, in my view, intention in the postmodern effort to be in dialogue with the historic building. And now we get to see that speaking, that exercise continue to play out, and that's the nature of the harmoniousness. But just a tiny little thing that I am wondering about, and I hadn't thought about it until this project. I know this is not really the area that we are asked to speak about, but it just occurred to me, is whether or not tinted glass is a postmodern feature. And I'm not sure if it is, or if it is a kind of an industry standard around the 1980s that made its way into the postmodern language, but put that aside, it is an interesting issue for me. And I think if and when we, in the future, there is an individual landmark, or we're looking to designate buildings that have been designed in the postmodern style would be an interesting thing to consider. But my final point is that, yes, I believe that this is appropriate and retains and observes the harmonious relationship to its sister building.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, Commissioner Holford Smith. I think the last time you saw this, you also felt it was not harmonious with 55. And so how are you feeling now?
Well, I'm really pleased to see that they are proposing to keep the majority of the base of the building, which I think is necessary to create that harmonious relationship. I don't think, I would have preferred if they had kept more stone at the base of the building. Somehow at that back wall could have had a little more stone detailed within it. And also, I'm concerned about the plane of the new glass at the 3rd and 4th floor windows that are being brought out flush to the face of the stone. And I think that really changes the reading of those openings. I think part of the relationship between the two buildings were those openings that had such deep reveals that relate to the really deep openings on 55. So I'm not sure that
Okay.
I think it's much better, but I think they have taken
fair.
away some things that have, made it less harmonious.
Okay, and it's interesting the take on that, the 3rd floor, because Commissioner Goldblum had sort of the opposite view that the making it flush made the entablature read more as a solid, more like 55. So I do think this question of depth and solidity is, sort of at the heart of the harmonious relationship, but there's different ways to look at it. Okay. All right, Commissioner Chapin. And last time you also felt the facade and the columns were too light and lacked a horizontal mass and monumental entrance. So where are you now?
Yes, I felt that the original proposal really did not preserve the harmonious relationship. And I think that this proposal now, by preserving the colonnade, the loggia, the architrave, really does preserve the main elements of what created a harmonious relationship. And that the changes to the windows to achieve more light, I think, are in my view, appropriate and do serve the purpose of the client, and at the same time do not negatively affect the harmonious relationship. So I can approve it as presented.
Okay.
As
Great, thank you. All right, Commissioner Chen, you had similar concerns the last time you saw this.
Yeah, that's right. Much like all the commissioners, we had concerns about the last proposal, and I think, as Commissioner Gustafson just mentioned, as Commissioner Goldblum alluded to, I think, quoting Commissioner Gustafson, this is a variation on the theme of the original design. And so therefore it's almost imperceptible other than, and Holford Smith's good point, and I remain to be seen whether Commissioner Goldblum is correct and is correct in the, how that glass will finally play out. The rendering cannot really tell. But overall, in the context of the original design compared to the latest proposal, I think they are similar, and they can be, they're very, that's why I use the word variation on the same theme. And I think it can be deemed appropriate, and I agree with the majority.
Okay, thank you. All right, and Vice Chair Bland.
I guess I'm the wrap up.
Yes, you're the wrap up.
Okay, good. I can spend just a few minutes if you don't mind. I will. First of all, this building is right around the corner from my office. I know the street, the block, the whole street really well. I think eating out as you can under those columns at 55 is analogous, as close as we can get in New York anyway, to eating beneath the columns of the Pantheon in Rome. It's an extraordinary building. The way it's been added to over time, second, the story of how it was added is one of the great preservation stories in the history of our city. I admire the building greatly. So the fact that it sold its air rights to make 60 is of great interest to me. And I want to say that I think would be almost impossible to say if this was the design, the original Kevin Roach design, maintained a harmonious relationship with which other people in the past have said it does. It would be impossible to say it doesn't now, because it's almost the same there. And I think this photograph says it all. But I want to just also say that I must say the elephant in the room, as Addie called it, was paramount in my mind too, as I will make my vote, even though it might be considered irrelevant. I viewed the truncation of the original Kevin Roach scheme to be inappropriate itself. Inappropriate, and I know that's not what we're even talking about, but I have to just say, I felt it was a problem, and it was too light, so therefore I could sort of say not harmonious enough. But I want to push back just very briefly on this whole notion that the only way to maintain a harmonious relationship here or anywhere else actually is to mimic, for instance, in this case, those grand columns. Those grand columns existed for any building on Wall Street that currently exists were built, including the building right across the street from it that's in the forefront on the left, on the north side of the street. Does it not have a harmonious relationship with 55? Do any of the other buildings on Wall Street not have a harmonious relationship, even though they don't mimic columns, et cetera, et cetera? I would argue that the whole street has almost consistently a harmonious relationship consistently with the whole street. So I'm hard pressed to say that the only way to have done this is those columns, but the columns do work, and therefore they're not changed. And I think because they have a relationship, the original relationship with the existing building at 60, and because they maintain the harmonious relationship as others have found it in the past, I can certainly support it now because it's hardly changed. And I think I want to compliment, however, KPF on coming back with this scheme with the new sheer glass wall behind it. I think that's a very appropriate way of updating without changing the basic essence of the Kevin Roach original. Thank you for a little bit of a diatribe.
Great, thank you. And thank you for wrapping us up so eloquently. All right, so I think we can move toward a vote. Commissioner Goldblum, would you go ahead and make the motion?
Sure. Regarding 60 Wall Street, the application is to amend CR 85-004, LPC 84-0715 to alter the base of 60 Wall Street. I note that the use of light-colored stone cladding and metal and glass windows in a regular and hierarchical composition, including the expression of monumental colonnade and comparable street wall height, are important factors in finding that the current building at 60 Wall Street and or any alterations to it has a harmonious relationship with the individual landmark of 55 Wall Street. I therefore recommend that we issue a positive report finding that the proposed alterations will not significantly affect the primary stone and colonnade base of the building, including existing granite colonnade and inner double columns fronting the ops entrance, the granite entablature above the colonnade, and the setback third and fourth floors of the base of the tower, including the secondary broken colonnade. Therefore, the harmonious relationship between the building and 55 Wall Street will be preserved as it exists today. That the removal of the existing recessed wall with granite cladding and tinted windows located behind the colonnade and the installation of a new wall with a clear glass curtain wall and new granite piers set on the same plane as the existing wall will be integrated into the overall architectural expression of the distinct postmodern style tower and will not compromise the overall composition of the building and the successful relationship between the building and the landmark. That replacing window assemblies within the existing masonry openings of the third floor entablature above the colonnade will not diminish the harmonious relationship established between the building and 55 Wall Street. That the combined window openings of the setback fourth floor set well behind the existing granite cornice will only be visible from select view corridors and will not meaningfully affect the overall composition of the facade, and that the proposed modifications will not affect the existing harmonious relationship of the building with 55 Wall Street.
Right, thank you. And Commissioner Devonshire, would you second that motion?
Second.
Thank you. All right, Mark, or John, Mark, will you call the
No,
vote?
I'm
Mark, you're here.
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Barron,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Devonshire,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi,
Aye.
Commissioner Holford Smith.
I'll vote aye with reservations.
With 11 in favor and none opposed, the motion passes.
So that's approved. Thank you. And we'll move to the next public meeting item.
The next item is public meeting item number 2, LPC 23-01837, an application for a binding report in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 1, Lot 10, Governor's Island, the Governor's Island Historic District. This is a portion of an island in New York Harbor containing fortifications and a range of military buildings dating from the early 19th century to the 1930s. The application is to install light poles throughout the historic district. This was last presented at the public hearing of October 11th, 2022. No action was taken at that time. The staff will do a brief introduction, followed by the applicants presenting the revisions to the proposal after we open the proceedings.
All right, so let's go ahead and do that now. Commissioner Jefferson, would you make a motion to open the proceedings?
So move.
Thank you. And Commissioner Gustafson, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, so the applicants may speak.
Good morning, Commissioners. Marcello Pacheco, Preservation Staff. At the public hearing of October 11th, 2022, the Commissioners reviewed a proposal for the installation of lighting throughout the Governor's Island's Historic District. All of the Commissioners were supportive of the scope to remove existing light poles and phase in a new lighting scheme around the island and of the light fixtures attached to the poles. However, there were mixed opinions regarding the materiality of the light poles, with some in support of the proposed wood poles and others unsure or suggesting metal poles be considered instead. Some commissioners also thought the size of the poles should be further studied. In response to these comments, the applicants have returned with a revised proposal and are here to walk you through the changes.
I can take it from there, Marcello. Thank you very much. And thank you, commissioners, and thank you, Chair Carroll, for the time and energy in reviewing our proposal. I'm Chris Tepper. I'm the Chief Development Officer at the Trust for Governor's Island. I'll just briefly go over we have slides which I think, Marcello, you're controlling. If you could go to the first slide. We did want to just highlight, of course, the ways in which we've modified our proposal based off comments we heard from commissioners at the last hearing that Marcello just went over at a high level. First of all,
Christopher, I'm so sorry. Nicole has control of the presentation. Nicole, you just need to advance the slides using your arrow keys or your mouse.
Yes, I'm trying to do that and it does not seem to be working. Oh,
there you go. I'm sorry.
Thanks for that. Next slide. I think this slide just going over our kind of the major changes. I mean, first of all, we just wanted to highlight one of the things that commissioners mentioned in discussion, which is, we are, and that just came up, it is an eclectic historic district that includes buildings from the very early 19th century through the 1930s and a few that are later than that too. And so we are looking for And the island obviously served as a military base for over 150 years, with lots of phases of construction and redevelopment, both in the historic district and throughout the rest of the island. We wanted to find a pole that both reflected that military history, but that also worked uniformly and both across the historic district and its many different areas and sub-district, as well as through the rest of the island seamlessly. In response to comments around kind of the utilitarian look of the poles or concerns around the light poles being too utilitarian, both in scale and dimensions, we've done two things. There's approximately 115 new poles proposed throughout the historic district. Every single one has been reduced in height by at least 5 feet. And in some cases, poles have been reduced by as much as 15 feet by swapping out the two different pole types in more sensitive areas, which I'll come back to. And then all pole widths have been reduced by at least 20%, the diameter of the poles themselves. And that's working with our structural engineer and design team. We made them as slim and short as possible to achieve the light levels and still ensure structural stability for the poles in the ground. And then I think one of the other areas of concern was how the poles were placed in particularly sensitive, lower scale, architecturally sensitive areas, specifically Nolan Park and Colonel's Row, with their two different types of housing typology. In those two specific areas, which we'll show in plan, we've greatly reduced the number of the higher moonlight poles. In Nolan Park, we went from 6 to 2 and completely changed the location plan for those poles so that none of the larger poles are adjacent to the smaller historic brick pathways or the buildings or the individual houses. And in Colonel's Row, we went from 2 to 0. Overall, that was a reduction of 40% across the historic district of those tallest poles. And those are really only now located adjacent to the parade ground, so that there don't need to be poles within the parade ground for the way that we use that large, unobstructed, grassy open space. So with those two changes, we've tried to address the concerns we heard from commissioners, but still maintain the overall spirit of the proposal as originally proposed. With that, I'll turn the presentation over to my colleague, Nicole DeFeo, who will take us through some of the specifics of what I just addressed in plan and design form.
Great. Thank you, Chris. I'm Nicole DeFeo, Director of Design and Construction here for the Trust. And building off of Chris's comments and setup here, just a reminder of what existing pole types and that kind of varied historic military base currently looks like on the island. These are images of the varied existing lighting on the island, as well as varied sort of space typologies that we see. The first image on the left is behind Building 400 or Liggett Hall. The second image is within the open green of Nolan Park. The third image is adjacent to Castle Williams. And the final image here on the right is along Hay Road by Colonel's Row, which we'll see some updated renders of as well. These images are again to remind the Commission of the experience of being on Governor's Island as a former military base and the inheritance that the Trust has of all these varied existing building types, not only of the varied building types, but also their sort of unusual layout within the island. And so these images are all of existing conditions that you will see on your walk from Swasson's Landing, where our current passenger and vehicle ferry brings the public from the Battery Maritime building, and on your way over to Nolan Park. So the image on the top left shows building equipment behind a chain link fence with several buildings sort of immediately adjacent to one another. You can see Pershing Hall here in the back. The image on the right is another view of Pershing Hall, where the U.S. government built these buildings immediately adjacent to one another, so that building 104 actually completely blocks the curved stair entry of Pershing Hall right behind it. The image on the lower left is just a reminder that from many places on Governor's Island, you can always see the ventilation tower from the Battery Tunnel. And this also shows the varying, again, typologies of buildings, a warehouse building of 140 adjacent to the public entry here of the stair that takes you up to our welcome wall at the top of Swassons. The image on the bottom right is on Andes Road. Our office is here on the left, and you can see a mishmash of, again, office type buildings, residential structures, and former warehouse spaces. This is consistent with how the island has historically been used. Again, we see similar sort of juxtapositions of building types throughout the North Island and throughout the historic district. These images also serve as a reminder. They were presented the last time we came before the commission, which was on October 11th of last fall. And just that serve as a reminder that for the majority of the time, utilities were actually strung on these poles. So you can see in these black and white photos, you can see the power lines that were actually strung from much taller utility poles throughout the historic district of the island. This image on the top left is Andes Road looking back towards Fort Jay. Again, here's the plan that we came and presented before the commission back in October. This shows the overall lighting plan for the historic district. The green dots represent those combination moonlight and street lights that Chris was mentioning earlier, and the red ones represent just a standard sort of pedestrian or street light that we're distributing throughout the historic district. For reference, we have Fort Jay in the center, Swassons Landing. As I mentioned before, a lot of those images that I showed were from this area here on the island. And then we have Nolan Park and Colonel's Row here, and this is the parade grounds. So we see in the previous iteration of the plan, these combination moonlights lining the parade ground, peppered throughout Nolan Park, and a few on Hay Road in front of Colonel's Row. The revised plan shows how we removed those two taller moonlights from Hay Road in front of Colonel's Row and replaced those with pedestrian streetlights, which are now only 20 feet tall. And then also here, we removed the moonlights again from, as Chris mentioned, from that pedestrian existing brick pathway that provides circulation around the Nolan Park houses, and moved them to the interior of this wooded green space. A comparison in elevation shows, again, the previous design that was presented to the commission. The LX04 is our combination post that shows this higher moonlight for ambient lighting and this lower street light. We originally presented a 35-foot tall post and reduced that by 5 feet. The top of the post is now 30 feet above grade. As Chris also mentioned, these posts, even though we're reducing the height and reducing the width, they also can be embedded without a foundation, which we thought was important to minimize disturbance within the historic district. So the height is overall reduced by 5 feet, and the overall width is reduced, in this case, by 1 inch at the top and 2 inches at the bottom. They still read as a tapered southern yellow pine wood post. And then again, for the vast majority of the lights proposed within the historic district is this LX01 proposed design. We originally presented a 25-foot tall post above grade, and we've reduced that now to 20 feet. And again, the reduction, these are actually much slimmer. They're reduced by 1.5 inches at the top and 2 inches at the bottom, so they read much slimmer. Here's a rendered elevation, again, showing that relationship within Nolan Park. The previous design proposal showed the combination moonlight and street light, which we had and also mocked up on the island immediately adjacent to. This is an elevation of building 20 in Nolan Park, which is the building closest to Fort Jay. And we've replaced that combination post with a shorter 20-foot post design. And so these are no longer being proposed for Nolan Park. And again, just more renders showing what that relationship looks like. This is the eastern elevation of Building 20 in Nolan Park. This open space here is the lead up basically to Fort J, is kind of over here to the right. So this is the last built building within Nolan Park, and kind of the first one that you see when you're walking over from Swassons. This revised elevation shows not only the lower height of the posts and their relationship to the existing building, but also the proposed spacing. We are proposing a much greater spacing than what the existing lighting is currently spaced out of the island, ultimately using less light posts overall throughout the historic district. Again, another view a little bit more zoomed out, showing that relationship to Building 20. And this is the brick. These people here are walking along that brick path that takes you around Nolan Park. Going back to the proposed material, the commission had requested to see kind of what this material would look like after it's been installed for several years. And so we've taken a lot of inspiration from the lighting at Brooklyn Bridge Park. And I went over there and took some photos of the light posts to see how they're doing today. These images on the right are of the southern yellow pine, which is the most popular material for these types of poles. There are other species available. We are proposing southern yellow pine. It's incredibly durable. It's able to bear the structural load of the lights while being embedded 10 feet below grade. And it will last basically a generation if taken care of. So this image on the right shows a close-up of how the wood sort of fades over time and blends into the landscape. The image on the left also shows how well it blends into the existing trees of the landscape here in wintertime. And of course, in the summertime, when all of these trees are leafed out, you're only noticing the post when it's on in the evening and where the light source is coming from. Again, these light posts are intended to be installed within the existing fabric of the tree canopy within the historic district. We won't be clearing any trees or even really trimming any branches. The idea is to have a dappled light effect, both for the street lights and the proposed moonlights. This is another image from Pier 1 on Brooklyn Bridge Park. Again, these light posts have been installed now for, I think, at least 10 to 12 years. The image on the right shows how similar the light posts look. These are also, to point out, these are a Class 2 light post that's been installed at Brooklyn Bridge Park. We are proposing a Class 4 light post, which is much slimmer than this, as we showed in the rendering. So again, this is looking at this lawn at Pier 1, and you can barely tell where the light posts exist within that landscape. These are some revised renderings of Nolan Park, showing what this would look like with this sort of faded or aged coloration of the wood posts of the southern yellow pine. The image on the left shows looking north, you can see the World Trade Center behind here. And this is where this image is where we had originally mocked up the light post. So this much taller light post would be replaced with a 20-foot tall light post. And here is looking down into Nolan Park, where you see a 20-foot tall light post here, and then how we've moved that combination post to the interior of the existing wooded area of Nolan Green of Nolan Park. Again, this is an image from Colonel's Row. Looking north, you see the World Trade Center again in this image. And this, actually reads a little dark, but you see the light posts here on the right, the relationship between Hay Road and the existing buildings on Colonel's Row, and how set back they are from Hay Road. And then the next light post is kind of all the way down the way here. So it gives you a sense of the spacing of these throughout. This is another image of the same road, Hay Road, looking south. One light post here, and the second one where these other two people are all the way down here. And then there were no comments from the commission on these. These are the proposed replacement of the mast lights at each of the 3 piers, but we just updated the renderings to show the revised material. Again, this is showing Swassons Landing here at the top of Governor's Island. This is at Pier 101. Pier 101 is here to the right. Pier 102 is from where the image was taken. And then this is Yankee Pier looking back to the historic district. And that's the end of my presentation.
Okay, thank you very much. Commissioners, do we have any questions? All right, I don't see any questions, so I'm going to send you all requests to unmute, or I'll ask you to go ahead and unmute yourselves so we can begin our discussion. And I do want to note that, as you know, we received a letter from the Metro Area Governors Island Coalition and the Victorian Society of New York, which have been made available to all of you prior to today's hearing. So we'll begin our discussion as was presented. I think the last time we saw this, we had some questions and concerns about the scale and design and materiality of the light poles. And so the applicants are back today with a scheme that significantly reduces the height and the number of them, particularly around Nolan Park, and the width or the diameter of the poles, so that they're scaled down and much thinner. I think everybody was comfortable with the fixtures last time. It was really a conversation about the poles. So we'll begin our discussion. Commissioner Devonshire, I think actually that when we saw this last time, you commented that the wood material was sort of the utilitarian nature of the wood material was consistent with the military site campus and military nature of the historic district on the island. And I think you were more open to it, also noting that it would weather over time and darken. And I think you were sort of comfortable, but now that we've seen the significant reduction in size and scale and look and the number, are you still comfortable with these?
Comfortable then, comfortable now. I
Okay.
can approve this. I think it's great.
Great, thank you. All right, and Commissioner Goldblum, how are you feeling now?
I didn't see it last time. I'm actually a fan of these. I told Corey I go probably several times a week up the Henry Hudson Parkway to come home, and they recently replaced a long stretch of light poles leading from northern Manhattan to the bridge there, Henry Hudson Bridge, I think it's called, with wood poles, quite a bit bigger than these. And they look, I was originally nervous about them. I thought they were going to look like telephone poles, but after they're done, they look really good. And they achieve the effect, which I think is intended here, namely a kind of a rustic, simple, but warm installation. And I think that this does that and will be quite successful.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Commissioner Chapin?
I agree. I think it's very appropriate to adopt a general lighting plan here. And this is a large site that I think would benefit from somewhat utilitarian, and as Michael says, rustic and simple pole. And by reducing the size and the width of these poles, they've also, made them less intrusive. So I'm fine. I can definitely support this as presented.
Okay, great. Thank you. Commissioner Holford Smith?
I agree. I think that the reduction in scale, I did not see the previous proposal, but looking at the reduction in scale and elimination of the combination high and low fixtures at the pedestrian paths is an improvement. And I think that the wood is appropriate here. I think it's simple and will blend in and won't call attention to itself. And I think it's a good solution for a master plan so I can approve it.
All right, great. Thank you. Commissioner Shamir Baran?
I agree with everything that's been said. I find it appropriate.
Commissioner Gustafson?
I'm still adjusting to going the wrong way around the table. Really
just shaking things up a little.
Anyway, first of all, I have to agree with Michael Goldblum. I thought I was the only one who noticed those poles on the Henry Hudson. I'm glad I'm not alone.
It's our job, man.
The question, of course, is whether we should be seeing these light poles at all. And I think they've done a great job in designing something and reacting, reducing the size, reducing the numbers so that they don't call undue attention to themselves and they're not obtrusive. And we really, we won't see them. I think they'll just be, they'll disappear into the landscape. That's terrific.
Thank you. Commissioner Jefferson.
It's just increases the wonderful atmosphere of that place. I can approve it.
Commissioner Lutfi.
Yeah, I had some reservations about this initially, and I think they've made some changes that make it work better by thinning out the poles and reducing the sizes and then reducing the number. And I also think they're being very thoughtful in terms of the kind of lights that are being used and whether or not they're warm or cool. And I don't think that we're commenting on what's going on at the pier, but they work well with them. So I think overall this will be very uniform, and because of the trees, I'm hoping that it will also blend. So I can, and I appreciate the sustainable aspect of it, so I can approve it.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Bland.
Who remembers that table anyway? So going which way around it doesn't matter. So I was skeptical the last time around because of my experience with these poles when they were first put in, as almost the first thing that was put in when Brooklyn Bridge Park started to be constructed. And I was frankly horrified because they just looked like huge telephone poles all over the place with smallish plantings going in to make the park. Well, guess what? Those smallish plantings grow. They grow into big trees. They grow all around these poles. The poles weather, et cetera, et cetera. So all of that said, I'm very comfortable with those poles and the nature of the light in Brooklyn Bridge Park, which I see, if not daily, certainly weekly. And I can support them here now that I understand them within the canopy. I think that's the key, within the canopy, because before somehow I wasn't understanding them quite so much as little trees, let's say, within the canopy. So in any event, they weather, they blend in, and for all the reasons have already been stated, I also now accept this as appropriate.
Thank you. And Commissioner Chen.
So just unmute myself. You can hear I have construction on as well. So I'll make it very brief. I'm in agreement, especially when Commissioner Devonshire is so comfortable with it.
All right, great. Thank you. All right, so I think we can move to an approval today. Commissioner Devonshire, would you make the motion?
In the matter of LPC 23-01837 Governor's Island, the Governor's Island Historic District, an application to install light poles throughout the historic district. I recommend approval, finding that removing the existing modern light poles will not cause the loss of any significant historic fabric, and the proposed installations will not damage any significant architectural features of the grounds or the streetscapes. That the proposed light poles featuring wood poles fitted with black finished light fixtures at varying heights are simply designed and utilitarian in nature and connect with the island's maritime history related to the U.S. Coast Guard and the Army. That the proposed light poles will utilize materials that are long-lasting to minimize maintenance needs and environmental impact. That the proposed work will establish a simple, regular, and standardized system of lighting throughout the island and historic district, and the cumulative amount of lighting installations within the district will be reduced. That the placement of the new light poles throughout the historic district will be evenly spaced and correspond to pedestrian pathways and will not overwhelm the streetscape or be obtrusive while providing safe pedestrian corridors and activity areas. That the size of the light poles will be scaled according to location and use, with smaller scale light poles used in close proximity to the smaller residential buildings and larger light poles used elsewhere away from these buildings, and will therefore not overwhelm the wide-ranging sizes and types of buildings. And the proposed work will support the reactivation and connectivity of the historic buildings and sites, thereby enhancing the special architectural and historic character of the Governor's Island Historic District.
And Commissioner Goldblum, would you second that motion?
Second.
John, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Barron,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Devonshire,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi,
Aye.
Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
11 in favor, none opposed. The motion passes.
And that's approved. Thank you. And we'll move to the next item.
And the next item is public meeting item number 3, LPC 23-04321, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 1245, Lot 24, 471 West End Avenue in the Riverside West End Historic District Extension 1. This is an altered Renaissance Revival style row house built in 1885 to 86. The application is to alter the facade and construct rooftop and rear yard additions. This was last presented at the public hearing of December 13th, 2022. No action was taken at that time. Staff will do a brief introduction before turning it over to the applicant to present their revisions after we open the proceedings.
Okay, and let's open the proceedings now so we can do that seamlessly. All right, Commissioner Chapin, would you make a motion to open the proceedings?
So moved.
Thank you. And Commissioner Lutfi, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, so the applicant may speak after the staff introduces the project.
Good morning, Commissioners. Marcello Pacheco, Preservation Staff. At the public hearing of December 13th, 2022, the Commissioners reviewed a proposal for the construction of rooftop and rear additions and modifications to the front facade at 471 West End Avenue. The Commissioners expressed concerns with the proposed front facade alterations, suggesting that the composition, details, and materials of the lower base and mansard roof be restudied. Most Commissioners also expressed concerns regarding the cumulative bulk of additions, suggesting that the bulk of the rear addition in particular be restudied. Additionally, some of these Commissioners felt that the materiality of the proposed rear addition should be further studied. In response to these comments, the applicants have returned with a revised proposal and are here to walk you through their changes.
Great, thank you. And just before we do that, I want to note for the record that Commissioner Holford Smith is recused on this item and is not present for this meeting item. Okay. Applicants may begin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think I have control of the screen.
Sam, if you just click on your screen, then you'll have control and then you
Got
can
it.
advance.
Okay, we're there. Anyway, good afternoon, committee, or good morning, Commissioners. I'm Sam White from PBDW Architects, the architects for 471 10th Avenue. The presentation that I'm going to show you, it goes from the general to the specific, but the comments that the Commissioners made at the last hearing were quite specific. So we're going to jump around or accelerate a little bit within this presentation to try to address the specific comments made by the Commissioners at the last hearing. In general, this is a elevation of the block between 82nd and 83rd Street. We have coming back with the same general massing on the facade with a 3.5-story building with a existing mansard roof and a 5th floor addition. There's no change to that, although I will get into the changes for the elevation itself. The rear elevation, this is the existing rear elevation. The proposed elevation, as before, increases the height of the existing elevation by 6 feet 5 inches, and there are a number of material and massing changes to the rear elevation that I will get into in a minute. This is a comparison of what we recreated as the original elevation, the historic elevation on the left. photograph that's made from a oblique historic photograph. The elevation in the center is what is there now, and the elevation on the right shows what we are proposing. The significant changes to this proposal are the arched windows to recreate the bilateral symmetry of the facade at the lower level, the retention of the slate on the mansard roof, and those are the the retention of the, or the recreation of the striping on the lower facade as opposed to the speckly brick that we had shown before. But I'll show you closer details in a minute. The general massing of the building remains the same. You can see that the changes occurring on the street facade down at the lower level. We changed the entrance door and the library window to match the arched windows of the historic elevation. We retained the slate on the roof, and on the rear, we've set the rear back. I think I can have to move you out of the way a little bit. We set the rear back 5 feet at the 4th and 5th floor. On this proposal, we've also added a small pergola at the 5th floor roof. But you'll see that a portion of that pergola is visible from the street. We think it's a sort of a benign presence on the street, and it will make a big difference to the people using the terrace up there, because a lot of lot line windows look out over this terrace, and I think it creates some privacy for both sides of that equation. This is a comparison one-to-one of the proposal that we showed you last month on the left and the proposal we're showing you now, with the changes to the what's called the first floor, the arches and the banding, as opposed to the asymmetrical composition that we came to you the first time, the retention of the slate, although we are using a lighter colored gray slate than the original dark black slate, and those are, I'd say, the significant changes that you see in elevation. This shows you the kind of topography around the entrance, where the same 4-step stoop is there. We, by creating the arches that we were in the historic elevation, we had to stretch, you will see, stretch down to get a door down to the landing of the 4-step stoop. But we have dealt with that with a combination of panels and glass, sort of glass panes. Otherwise, the elements of this remain the same. Here's a more detailed pure elevation showing how the arches are replacing the original submission. The commissioners said that we did not have to use the arches. They were interested in the symmetry of the original, and we didn't have to use the arches or the banding. We looked at this, but what we found was that without the arches, it was impossible to create a sense of symmetry because of the way the doorway has to be stretched vertically, because there's no longer that sort of vertiginous stoop that was in the historic design. Those arches are essential to sort of giving you a sense of the symmetry of that elevation. So yes, we didn't have to do it. We looked at alternatives, but we're coming back to you with the arches and with the banding, because we think that they do reflect the intent of the commissioner's remarks to preserve the symmetry of the elevation. This is a detail just showing various sort of CCTV cameras and mailboxes, doorbells and things like that that we've tried to bury within the woodwork of the front entrance door. This detail shows the veneer of brick that we're adding to the basement and first floor over the existing stucco. Some of the commissioners felt that the demising line between the original brick on the second floor and up and the new brick on the first floor and down needed to be studied. We did study it, and what we ended up doing was to enhance the element that marked the distinction between the new and the old. We had originally shown as a header brick, which you see in the center. We're proposing to use a much more robust glazed terracotta piece that would be dark brown to mark the difference between new and old. With respect to the skylight in the mansard, some commissioners felt that the skylight that we came to you with a month ago projected too far from the plane of the mansard roof. So we have brought the skylight back to as close to the roof as we can. With respect to the difference between the skylight and the dormer, we still feel that the dormer upsets the balance of the elevation, and we think the skylight is a better solution, even though the dormer has been there for a long time. There were comments by the commissioners about the mullion that marked the change in plane of the skylight from the sloped to the vertical. That makes the difference between the operable window below the mullion and the fixed windows above. And what we're showing is that the operable window is something that can be reached by somebody in that room. By removing the dormer, we are able to rebuild about 3 feet of that brick wall. You can see that the dormer came way low on that elevation, and with the mansard and the skylight, we can rebuild 3 feet of that brick, which we think will make a big difference. We aren't coming back with a proposal to replace the cornice as was hoped for by the commissioners, but we think that the rebuilding of the brick around there goes a great way to restore that sort of sense of the cornice. It says that I have been signed out. I'm not sure if I have been. Can you still hear me, Madam Chair?
We can hear you. Yes, we can hear you and we can see you.
Okay, well, it's telling me that I have to leave the webinar, which is which may be the feeling of the commissioners. But the placement of that mullion, I mean, it is, yes, in the same point as the top of the cornice, but the two occur in sort of different planes, and we think that as seen from street level, they're not going to seem to be part of the same construction. We're not trying to pretend that break in plane is the cornice. It's just where the break in plane would occur. The commissioners had been concerned on the rear elevation about the formality of a rain screen made of terracotta. We have changed that to a brick, which would be fully set within the masonry of the building rather than a rain screen. And they asked that we acknowledge the massing of the historic building, which had a cornice at the 3rd floor level. And what we've doing here is to set the building back 5 feet above the 3rd floor. So the 4th and 5th floor are set back. We've recreated the original sort of 3-course brick cornice there at the ceiling of the 3rd floor. We looked into changing the color of the brick for the addition above, but found that that was sort of distracting and called attention to itself in what we thought was an unneighborly way. So we are proposing to make the brick continuous from top to bottom, although there is a setback and a 5-foot balcony. The other small change that we made was that we made the bottom 2 floors, the basement and the 1st floor, just a little bit wider. We think that expanding the width of that element sort of helped to overcome the sort of the vertiginous vertical rise of the elevation so that it landed a little bit more in the garden. Here you see a detail. It's just a few inches more on either side, but we think it makes a difference. With respect to the sections are unchanged except for the setback at the rear at the 4th floor and the presence of the pergola, which this section, the sight line shows you see a bit of. Otherwise, the sections remain the same as what we came to you with back last month. The plans also are unchanged, except at the 4th and 5th floor. We pulled it in 5 feet. You see at the 4th floor, there's a roof in the back behind that bedroom to the left. The original proposal is on the top there. And on the 5th floor, we pulled it in 5 feet. And on the roof, again, pulled it in that 5 feet. And when we came to you the last time, we didn't have full information about mechanical. Now we understand what the mechanical systems are, and we have a mechanical system that will comply with the New York City Code with respect to noise and the fire department access. We think that we have responded to the commissioner's comments, and if we have not, we would be happy to, or if I have failed to suggest one, I'd be happy to come back and see if we can come back in this presentation and see if there's something that I have left out. But this is our revised presentation, and we hope that it does in fact address the commissioner's comments. Thank you very much. I'm going to move it to something more. We could start there.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. All right, commissioners, do we have any questions about any aspect of the proposal, the front, the roof, or the rear? All right, I'm not seeing any questions. And I'll just note that we did receive letters from the boards of a letter from the boards of directors of the adjacent properties 465 and 473 West End Avenue, and Landmarks West and the Victorian Society of New York. Those letters, oh, and the West End Preservation Society. Those letters have been shared with the commissioners in advance of today's public meeting. All right, so yes, Commissioner Jefferson, please go
I
ahead.
must ask one question. The 6 feet above the existing height, does that affect any windows on the lot line at all?
I am going to ask the project architect, Kristen, if she could come into my office, and I will get back to you in 2 minutes, but there may be other questions that come up. Kristen, could you come in and answer that question?
So, and while we're waiting for that, I'll just also, I wanted to confirm that the rooftop addition.
Does the 6 feet block any windows? What? Okay, thank you. Madam Chair, and the addition of 6 feet 5 inches changes views to and from those lot line windows, but it does not block any lot line windows that are not currently bricked up.
Thank you.
All right, Commissioner Goldblum.
Okay, there we go. All right, so looking at this elevation, I think that I just wanted to clarify what the detail is at the skylight, which you have on page 16. So the capping mullion, it kind of looks like it's aligning with the top of the cornice. It's just like it's just a metal mullion. That's what that is.
It's just a metal molding, and it's just to accommodate the change from the fixed glazing above to the operable window below.
Got it. All right, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, and I wanted to just also confirm that the rooftop addition is not visible from a public way, and the pergola is just going to be minimally visible. Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay, and so I think just with the pergola, you just as you're under construction, should there be an approval, I would just want you to continue to work with the staff to verify that. Okay, other questions? All right, I'm gonna ask you all to unmute so we can move to our discussion. And so this involves work to bring this building back and help it to contribute to the streetscape. And that includes work at the front facade, the roof, and at the rear facade. And specifically at the front facade, the commission asked the applicant to restudy the design to incorporate the arches into the design of the new base, and also to use slate at the roof, which is now being proposed. And while the commission has approved significant sort of rooftop and rear yard additions to these kind of standalone row houses that are between large apartment buildings, we did ask applicants to study the scale and materiality of the addition to sort of retain some of its row house typology, and they've made some changes, including adding a setback to reference the typology and rethought the materials. So let's begin our discussion. I think Vice Chair Bland, the last time we saw this, I think you thought that many of the aspects of the design that they were proposing then were very successful. And so with these additional changes, how are you feeling now?
Well, I think with the unerring eye and sense of proportion that our architect brings to this little project, both in the front and the rear, that it's the bullseye for me. I think slight adjustments in some things and more significant ones than others have hit the mark. So very appropriate now.
All right, thank you very much. Commissioner Lutfi?
Hold on. Am I unmuted?
Yes, you are.
Okay. So I happen to agree with Fred. I think here, I'm going to say, finessed moves have really made this much more of a contributing building. Everything from, lowering the stoop at the entryway to introducing the windows at the window at the top, but it was already there. Or the bottom window at the top of the door, when the stoop was lowered, the banded brick, of course, which was already there. And I think the slate material at the top of the roof, the setback at the roof, in the back, I think it all, and the brick, adding the brick at the back, all really help make this a contributing building now.
All right, great, thank you. Commissioner Jefferson?
It's all appropriate. They did a very good job.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Gustafson?
Yeah, I agree. I think the restoration of the arched windows is has a big impact, and as well the going to the banded brick. It really takes us back to the way the building looked originally. Otherwise, I'm completely fine with it.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Shamir Baron?
I agree that the restoration of the arched windows is a very positive thing, as well as the banding. I think the only thing that I think is a little bit of a loss as compared to the last proposal presentation that's on page 11 is the depth that they were able to achieve in the of the door plane from the face of the building. And I think that was a bit more successful and sort of subtle than what we currently have, and which includes this kind of extra transom. It's seems a little bit heavy and a little bit pushed to the front of the building. And I don't know if that can be modified. I don't think it's critical that it be modified, but they got at something, I think, in this aspect in the previous proposal that maybe they can find again, but overall, I think this is appropriate and improved.
Okay, great, thank you. And Commissioner Chapin?
Yeah, I agree with other commissioners that this is a very successful proposal, and I think the changes, particularly to the front facade, have been are very appropriate. And I can also approve the back and the top, the rooftop addition. And I want to just mention that I think the minor visibility of the pergola is also appropriate.
Okay, thank you very much. Commissioner Goldblum?
I agree. I think it's appropriate and well done.
Commissioner Devonshire?
Successful, and I can approve it.
And Commissioner Chen?
Likewise, yeah, I echo the sentiment of the commissioners who support the restoration of the arch windows.
Okay. All right, so I think we can all support this. So I'll go ahead and make this motion then. In the matter of docket number 23-04-321-471 West End Avenue in the Riverside West End Historic District Extension 1, an altered Renaissance Revival style row house built in 1885 to 86. This is an application to alter the facade and construct rooftop and rear yard additions. And I note that the building style, scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Riverside West End Historic District Extension 1. I recommend approval, finding that the proposed work at the front facade will eliminate unsympathetic later alterations that detract from the building, that the proposed construction of a low stoop and new entryway and alterations to the fenestration will return these elements closer to their original locations and proportions and will recall the original hierarchy and organization of the facade, that the proposed banded brickwork at the new outer wall layer at the lower floors will recall the historic brick pattern at the base of the building, that the existing dormer, which was an early 20th century alteration, is in a highly deteriorated condition beyond repair, and that the proposed sloped skylight that will replace it will be well integrated with the modified roof line, that the rear addition will not be visible from any public thoroughfare and only the pergola at the roof and glass and metal guardrail above the rooftop addition will be minimally visible over the front facade, that this row house is the last remaining from an original row of 6 within a block currently comprised mostly of large apartment buildings, and therefore the proposed rear yard addition will not eliminate the block's central green space, that the construction of a full height rear yard addition that connects with a setback rooftop addition will recall the massing of the existing building as it expanded over time and will not overwhelm the adjacent larger apartment buildings that separate it from the remainder of the block, that the design and materiality of the rear addition featuring brick cladding, punched window and door openings, and metal Juliet balconies will be in keeping with the scale and materials of the historic building, that the design and materiality of the rooftop addition and stair bulkhead featuring standing seam metal cladding with metal windows and doors will be in keeping with the variety of materials found at rooftop accretions within the historic district, and that the work will enhance the special architectural and historic character of the building and the streetscape. Okay, thank you. Ken, Vice Chair Bland, would you second that motion?
Second.
All right, and Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Barron,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Devonshire,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi.
Aye.
With 10 in favor, none opposed, the motion passes.
Right, so that's approved. Thank you. And please feel free to continue to work with the staff on the depth of the door and to mock up that pergola at the right time.
Will do.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Commissioner.
Okay, we'll now move to public meeting item number 4, LPC 22-05842, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Queens, block 10301, lot 28, 11203 178th Street in the Adderley Park Historic District. It's currently a vacant lot. The application is to construct a freestanding house. This was last presented at the public hearing of November 15th, 2022, and no action was taken at that time. The staff will be presenting the revisions to the proposal.
James, you're muted. Okay, why don't I?
Thank you. Okay. Good afternoon, James Rusiello, Preservation Staff. At the public hearing of November 15th, 2022, the commissioners supported the construction of a new house in the Tudor Revival style. However, the commissioners asked that the applicants restudy the details of the dormers and gables relevant to the Tudor Revival style, the scale of the windows relative to their placement on the broad 112th Street North facade, and the materials used, particularly creating brick and steeper, creating a brick base and steeper gables. In response, the applicants have returned with a new design. They move the house back slightly on the lot away from the sky exposure plane, eliminating the need to clip its front gable, and redesign the facades to feature steeper defined gables, To feature steeper defined gables within the half timbering and the brick clad first floor. As initially presented, the applicants proposed a beige cementitious stucco throughout, defined by painted pressure treated half timbering that was slightly jettied out on the second floor, with the broad north facade featuring 2 dormers and brick limited to the entrance steps and porches. The revised design features real Flemish bond brick with soldier course bands separating the first floors and the raised basement. I'm just going to click over to that. You can see it here. The basement, which also includes graded areaway light wells. The entrance bay at the 178th Street facade will be clad in stone, which wraps around the corner with simple coining. The upper floors will feature a white cementitious stucco with FIPON half timbering. And the broad facades feature 1 central half timbered structure dormer flanked by 2 smaller dormers. The porch railing will remain wrought iron, the windows remain metal, and the roof remains asphalt shingled. As the broad facades, the applicants have widened the paired windows at the first floor and enlarged windows at the second floor in response to the commissioner's request for more glazing at the primary facade. The remainder of the presentation was previously presented at the public hearing and shows the applicant's study of typical Tudor Revival freestanding houses in the district and corner houses in the district. Dora Sanchez and Laura Lakshmi from the architect's office are here to answer your questions.
All right, thank you. So commissioners, are there any questions for either James or the applicant?
Let's just leave it there.
All right, I'm not seeing any questions. So I think we can just move to our discussion. And as James presented, the last time we saw this, I think that the commission unanimously supported the idea of a Tudor Revival style as the approach for the new building, but felt that the applicant needed to really study other Tudor Revival style buildings to get the details and materials right. And the suggestions that came out of our discussion as included, making the gables a steeper roof line and pitch, and adding a brick to the base was another suggestion that many commissioners agreed with, and loosening up the windows and making the long facade a little more variegated and exuberant. So the applicant has this revised proposal in response to those comments today. So let's have a discussion about how we feel about it now. Commissioner Jefferson, you specifically felt that the long facade needed some more study, and so how are you feeling today?
It's so much. It's improved considerably. I think it's charming. It's nice. The only issue I have, we only see 2 facades, so I don't know the other 2. The staircase, the main staircase is, I think it's brick, right? It's brick. And I'm wondering if the other side, the left-hand facade, is also has the same.
It's going to be brick as well, and there it is.
Oh, okay. So the base, the whole base is there. Yeah, it's very nicely done.
Okay, great. Thank you. Commissioner Gustafson.
Yeah, I think they addressed all of our concerns, and I think the first time around it was sort of difficult to figure out what exactly was wrong with it, but the materials change is a dramatic improvement and really helps to define the style for me. So I'm okay with it as it is.
Thank you. Commissioner Shamir Baran.
I also think it's tighter and more, it's an aspect of it is more refined. The previous proposal had about it an aspect of half timber that I think we all are kind of familiar with, is a certain kind of heaviness or awkwardness at the roof, at the roofs, at some of the eaves. And so I wasn't entirely, or would not have been entirely opposed to it, but I do think that what's being proposed currently is well done, and I can approve.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Holford Smith. Is she here? No, she's not back yet. Commissioner Chapin.
Yeah, I think that the steeper gables and the change in materials has resulted in really a charming little structure and a larger structure. And I can approve it. I think it's very appropriate now.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Goldblum.
Okay, I generally agree. It's greatly improved. I would just suggest the staff look carefully at a few things. First of all, FIPON? Have we ever approved anything with FIPON? Goodness gracious, I hope not. That's foam.
Corey, I don't know
Please,
if you
let's
want to answer that question.
Have we done FIPON?
I think we've done more of the AZEC type trim that's painted
Yeah.
cellular PVC, but I'm not sure that we have approved FIPON.
Yeah, AZEC's bad enough. I mean, I would strongly urge the applicant to consider making it out of wood or something a little closer to a quality material that's associated with landmark buildings. Number two, the stone entry pavilion is lovely, but it looks like it doesn't return at all, and you'll just see a little skinny little strip of stone down the side. So I'd suggest they return it a little bit. They can figure out with staff how much. And lastly, the two triangular kind of shed dormers that we see over the front facade, at least on the front portion of the building, they should be set back a little bit, or else those two little steeper lines will just wind up looking like they're applied. It should probably be set back by about a foot, but otherwise I do think it's appropriate.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Devonshire.
I agree with Commissioner Goldblum's comments. I would just say we could save the applicant a good deal of time and money by having them change the FIPON to another material, because the FIPON will probably blow away in the first year and they would have to come back with another application. So if they change it now, we won't have that issue, nor will they.
Okay. Commissioner Chen.
Yeah, I agree with the two Michaels about the FIPON, as well as Commissioner Jefferson. I think I don't recall I was on the first hearing, but seeing the proposal, I think I probably skip out for another meeting. But I think in comparison, the contract to last time, this is a much improved.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Bland.
I confess I'm not up to everything I should be on using fake wood on small houses, but I'm glad others on the commission are. I rely on them. The lack of two other elevations is a little dismaying, but presumably, well, I don't know.
They're there. Here they are.
Oh, they are. Okay, sorry. I didn't see that. Okay, fine. That's good. All right. So this proposal is much improved. I think it's appropriate, but I just want to caution everybody. These drawings are a little cartoonish, and in the hands of a contractor who is not really up to speed, this could become a very cartoonish house, not just drawings.
Yeah.
And I think more than ever, the staff will be needed to monitor the quality. And Michael Goldblum said earlier, the stone could be a pastiche, just a pasted on pastiche rather than returning. So these sorts of details in construction are going to be crucial to making this an actual appropriate house in reality, as opposed to drawings that we approved today. But I do approve them today as appropriate.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Lutfi.
So I agree that this project is greatly improved from where it was, and all of the additional comments that my fellow commissioners have made about the FIPON and about, returning the brick, and also about working closely with staff to make sure that this truly becomes the improved project that they are presenting to us today, it would be very helpful.
Okay. All right, great. So we'll make a motion to approve contingent upon them continuing to restudy the 5-pond material to do wood or something better, more closely replicating wood, and to refine the details like the stone returns at the entry and there was one more thing. Oh, setting back the dormers a little bit. So I'll go ahead and of course, any other details as the staff reviews the final construction drawings and works with the applicant through the construction. So let me go ahead and I'll make that approval motion. Okay, in the matter of docket number 22-05-842-112-03, 178th Street in the Addisley Park Historic District. This is a vacant lot and an application to construct a freestanding house. And I note that the houses in this historic district reflect popular architectural styles of the early part of the 20th century, including English Tudor Revival, Colonial Revival, and the arts and crafts styles, with the favored style in the district being Tudor Revival, and featuring asymmetrical facades of stucco and brick decorated with half timbering and steeply pitched overlapping gables. And that synthetic siding, including vinyl, aluminum, or faux stone, has been installed at many houses over time prior to designation. I recommend approval with modifications, finding that the construction of a new building on this vacant lot will enhance the character of the historic district by establishing a built corner at the intersection of 178th Street and 112th Avenue. That the existing streetscape consists of a range of two-story over basement freestanding houses, 2/3 of which feature elements of the Tudor Revival style. Therefore, the proposed building's height, massing, and stylistic references will be compatible with the streetscape. That the varied roof profile and facade composition is reflective of Tudor Revival freestanding residences throughout the district. The materials palette of red brick, tan, cementitious stucco, brown painted, pressure-treated half timbering, and stone accents will harmonize with the building, excuse me, the materials and finishes of historic and contemporary buildings found throughout this historic district. That most of the houses on the block feature replacement roofing material and replacement windows, and the proposed brown asphalt shingle roof and wood polymer composite windows will blend with the materials of the streetscape while recalling historic roofing materials and wood multi-light windows in terms of profiles and finish. That the punched openings featuring single paired and tripartite multi-light double hung windows and slightly projecting gable fronts and a slightly projecting upper floor will be evocative of the Tudor Revival style and will be compatible with the character of the streetscape. That the metal work of the porches is typical of the level of detailing of early 20th century ironwork, and that the proposed site work, including the establishment of a sidewalk matching the width of others in the district, a curb cut and driveway at the rear of the house, and the preservation of 2 mature trees and the planting of additional street trees will further integrate the development of the site with the historic district. However, I recommend that the half timbering be made of painted wood or alternative material that better recalls wood. That the applicant continue to work with the staff to refine the details, including the return of the stone at the entry and setting back the shed dormers from the front gable. And that they continue to work with the staff on the execution of all details as the staff monitors the final construction drawings and as they continue the construction of the new house. All right, Commissioner Jefferson, would you second that motion?
So second.
Thank you. And Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Barron,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Devonshire,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi.
Aye.
With 10 in favor, none opposed, the motion passes.
All right, that's approved, but please continue to work with the staff on all of those details. All right, we'll move to the next item.
The next item is public meeting item number 5, LPC 21-00794. This is an application for an amendment. It's in the Borough of Brooklyn, block 1679, lot 37. 418A Lewis Avenue in the Bedford-Stuyvesant Expanded Stuyvesant Heights Historic District. This is an altered row house built circa 1870 to 71. The application is to legalize work completed in non-compliance with the LPC permit, including alterations at the front facade and areaway and the construction of a rear yard addition. Last presented at the public hearing of May 24th, 2022. No action was taken at that time. The staff will do an introduction to the presentation and the applicant's here to answer any questions after we open the proceedings.
Okay, so let's go ahead and do that now. Commissioner Chapin, would you make a motion to open the proceedings?
So moved.
Thank you. And Commissioner Goldblum, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the applicants may speak.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Winnie Chow, Preservation Staff. This item is 418A Lewis Avenue, located on the east side of Lewis Avenue between Bainbridge and Decatur Street in the Bedford-Stuyvesant Expanded Stuyvesant Heights Historic District. This item was last heard by the Commission on May 24th, 2022. As initially presented, the proposal was to legalize work performed in non-compliance, including the installation of a chairlift in front of one modified window, the installation of the center bay windows in an asymmetrical pattern, and the construction of the rear yard addition according to approved plans, which were inaccurate and showing dimensions of existing conditions at the rear yard and adjacent lot. The commissioners as a whole were supportive of legalizing the construction of the rear yard addition as is. With regards to the other aspects of the proposal, some commissioners were okay with legalizing the current locations of the windows, and others wanted to know what it would entail to correct these windows. With regards to the lift, most commissioners wanted to see studies for other options for barrier-free access to be able to determine that the existing condition is the most appropriate one. In response, the applicants have taken another look at all possible options and are back today with explanations to why this lift is still the best option and how they intend to integrate it better within the areaway. They will also further explain and advocate for retaining the windows as they are. The applicants are here to walk through their presentation and answer any questions. Thank you.
Right. So I'd like to ask the applicants to go ahead and unmute yourself and state your name, and you may begin the presentation.
Talia, it looks like you're having issues. Let me take this back and hang on a second. Okay, Natalie, can you unmute yourself first, please?
There.
Thank you. Great.
I think you can hear me now.
I will give you control again, so please click on your screen. Perfect.
Okay.
Please state your name
Perfect.
for the record. You may begin.
Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Natalie. I'm an associate here at Pax Architecture. We were not the architects of record for this project. We were brought in by the client when he received the letter of non-compliance. As stated by Winnie, we're here to go over the presentation and the two items that were left for us to further explore, which were the window placement and the ADA lift. In this slide, I just want to remind everyone that, the photos here on the left are the tax lot photos from 1939. This is our building. It's sort of obscured by the tree here, but our design inspiration was actually 2 lots over at 422 Lewis Avenue. This is the photo of the facade before construction, and this is the as-built condition of the facade. I'm going to focus first on the location of the window placement. And so here we took photos of the block to kind of show the pattern and the rhythm of the windows on our side of the block. And in the following slide, more specifically, the houses that are adjacent to us, that show that our neighboring buildings are also asymmetrical and don't have a regular rhythm for the placement of their windows. And thus the placement of the asymmetrical placement of the as-built condition, we don't think is out of character within the buildings in our block. And sort of this diagram illustrates where the center line are and where the openings of these buildings lay in relationship to that center line of the facade. And then in this slide is, this was the approved design condition. This was the as-built condition that shows that the windows were shifted towards the right rather than the left, making it closer to the entryway. Now, in this elevation, we're showing kind of the proposed legalized condition that we're going for. And so, we think that keeping the windows where they are, it's not out of character with the neighborhood. And then in order to conceal the
I think they
lift,
do. I think they do understand. I haven't heard from them.
for the lift, we are proposing modifying the entryway and constructing it as a brick fence that further conceals the lift from view. And so this is a rendering that we put together, kind of showing the proposed legalizations in place. And so here the sconces are relocating, the lift is still in place, the windows are in place, but now we have the new brick stop fence with the trees behind. And as you can see, it conceals what's behind a lot more. And I think the lift becomes less of an object that, that our eyes are drawn to. This slide shows sort of a perspective condition, looking at the facade from its most visible spot as we approach it from the right. And on the left side, this stoop that's very steep conceals the lift. And so that's less of an issue in terms of visibility. And then this is a photo collage of the fence and the facade with the legalizations in place. And as you can see, sort of this brick fence that we're proposing, it's in character with one of the neighboring buildings. And so, and with the brick stoop that is next to us. And we think it serves to better conceal what's behind the areaway in a way that it's still part of the neighboring buildings, in contact with the neighboring buildings. We were asked to explore the different options, for relocation, and through the next slides, we're going to go through those explorations and why we don't recommend it and why we don't think that they necessarily are a better option than keeping the windows and the lift in place. And so for the relocation of centering the windows, just the difficulty of the relocation of the window logistically, right? Like it would require that we move those lintels. It would require that the whole stucco facade, because it's not something that you can easily patch, the whole top coat would need to come off and redone. And since the facade was never meant to be symmetrical in the first place, it's just a very expensive endeavor for the client to take on to relocate these windows. And I think the small shift doesn't really add to the context in this area. Here, this was more an exploration of why the lift was placed where it is placed. And so this is just showing a diagram of all the elements of the areaway. And so this is the main entrance to the building shown in green. This is in blue, we're showing the cellar access hatch that was existing. And then in pink, we're showing the location of the ADA lift as the only possible option where we can locate it, because locating a lift on the steps, one, is not allowed by code, and two, spatially, we just didn't have the space to locate a lift on this side. And then we're also proposing a few other improvements to the areaway, which is, paving this area in stone next to it. Right now it's dirt. And then this is the species of planting that we're proposing on the front, behind the brick fence. And this slide is just sort of showing how spatially, there's a constraint for a ramp. And so a ramp was just not a possibility at all. This is what we would require to be able to move in through and use this landing. And, with the other, with the hatch and the other impediments, this just was physically just not a possibility. Here is just explaining the code and the reasons why we couldn't do one of the platform lifts that can be sort of tucked away along this areaway. Per code, you're not permitted to have a platform lift in an accessible route. And so this is the main access to 3 units. And because this is only serving the 1 unit, this is what the DOB plan examiner at the time instructed the applicant that this would be the approach that should be taken. And then we're going to go through the few options about the lift. One of the options that we were asked to explore was just flipping this tower on the lift. And it would be achievable if a new lift were to be purchased. It's not something that you can just, we couldn't take the existing lift and flip it. We would have to purchase a new lift with the tower on the left side. And it would also, in addition to relocating all of the lift components, it would require the Siamese connection for the sprinkler system is on this side right now. It would require it to be relocated. And so, you know, it would be significantly costly between the material, between the purchase of the lift itself and just all the design and application fees to relocate the Siamese within the fire department, which we just didn't think that this was, it's gonna yield a better option. And then on this side, we looked at alternatives of lifts, of what it would be like to provide something that had glass doors. The existing lift cannot be modified to have glass door, so it would need to be a new lift to be installed. And just, you know, this lift alone, the lift alone would be around $30,000 to $35,000 to get a new lift. And we don't think this one is, it has glass doors, but I don't think it's any less visible than what is currently installed. And then the one on the right here, where it would be an all glass lift, yeah, sure, it would be, you know, a little bit less noticeable, but it's a very hefty cost to install something like this. And here in this area, we're just showing the paving modifications that we're proposing so that this area kind of feels more integrated with this. And so, and this is like the pathway to all of the fire department connections and the fire safety equipment. And we're proposing a bluestone to be paved in this area. And then this is the, again, where I'm just going back to the slide that shows the rendering of the facade with all of this legalization and design corrections implemented. And I think that concludes our presentation.
Okay, thank you. All right, commissioners, do we have any questions? Yes, go ahead, Commissioner Chapin. Diana, you just have to unmute.
I don't know. I don't remember if I was present at the previous hearing, but
you were, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I was just going to say, just what is the explanation for all of this work occurring, the back and the front, without in you know, non-compliance with the approval that the applicant had in 2017?
Yeah,
I know the architect wasn't the architect of record then, but you know, do you know what happened?
Sure. My name is Paul Capice. I'm an architect with Pact Architecture and Natalie's colleague. So I'll describe this a little bit. Starting with the windows, we did describe this at the last hearing, but it was basically an error in the architectural plans. The contractor worked off the architectural plans, not the elevations for dimensions, and the plans actually showed the windows aligned within the walls, specifically at the, I believe it was the 3rd floor, where the basically to install the windows as they were in the elevations would have put the windows directly into the partition dividing 2 bedrooms.
And so working off those plans and working backwards, and actually, if you do the math on those plans, there's a bust in the numbers of about 12 inches. And you'll see that the windows are roughly 11 inches off of the original location. So the contractor, again, working off these plans, thought this is where the windows belong. They should have paid more careful attention to the elevations, no question. But this is what happened. The issue is obviously the building's occupied right now. Making these, as Natalie explained, making these sort of changes right now is quite an undertaking. And another thing to keep in mind is that the windows, even in the previous design, were not centered on this facade. It was not a symmetrical facade. They were actually justified slightly to the left, where now they're justified slightly to the right. When it comes to the ADA access, what happened there is they went for their landmarks hearing. I don't know how this happened, but there's a version of the plans out there that doesn't have the lift on it. If I look at the DOB approved plans, they do have a lift, but the lift isn't shown in the elevations. It's only called out in the plans. How this happened, why this happened, I have no idea. The landmarks hearing and the landmarks presentation clearly didn't show the lift. What I believe happened, and again, I'm kind of a detective, I spent some time trying to figure out what happened. It seems like while they were at their review at the DOB, at some point towards the end of the review, the plan examiner made them put in this lift. They simply drew a box and said handicap lift, and they got approved. That version of the plans didn't make it to landmarks. Why? I don't think there's another place for them to put this lift. We did study this, and this is where the lift needs to go, and it's a 3-family home. It needs to have a lift. But I can't, tell you exactly why it didn't get to you. It should have. And by the way, the DOB plan examiner shouldn't approve plans unless you saw landmarks drawings that showed the lift. But this isn't what happened. So whatever the process was supposed to be, that's not what happened. And then when it comes to the, actually on the back of the house, the addition was built to the proper plan dimensions. What's incorrect on the, and it's only on the site plan, and it's something we noticed and pointed out, on the site plan to the neighboring building to the right, we're showing their addition, or we weren't showing it, whatever was shown on the site plan, that addition was shown deeper than it actually is. And when we did our as-built analysis and went out and surveyed the property and took our own dimensions, we realized that our dimensions were right on our building, the as-built addition, but the neighbor's building's depth was wrong. So we did point that out because I just think it was important to be transparent in that this is obviously would be something of importance to the commissioners. So I don't know why it was shown that way, but that's how it was shown.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Jefferson?
A couple of questions. The partition on the second and third floor, is it required on the ground floor?
There is, no, it's a single room on the ground floor. And it's either the second or third floor. I do not recall which floor it's on. I'd have to pull out the plan.
So the window on the ground floor can be moved over if required. And the second issue is, what are you recommending? Do nothing? I mean, the lift doesn't work. You just recommend putting in a wall and that's it? That's all you're recommending to change?
Yes, for the lift, I don't think, I honestly believe if I was hired to design this building and do this, that is the location of the lift, that's where I would put it, and it probably wouldn't be.
And that's fine, that's fine. What about the color of the lift? Could it be changed? Right now, it looks gray on this one, but in another picture, you show it as white. And the angle view of it is clearly visible. It's white or? Okay.
We could try to, I'm sure it can be painted. We could paint that lift to match the.
Can you drop it down into the ground a little bit more so it's less visible from the wall? Are there other design tools that can make this better?
The lift, unfortunately, there's not, we looked in, you know, we called the lift company and went through this with them, what sort of flexibility we have with tower location. Can we replace doors? Can we, you know, what options do we have? And the reality is not much. We can't do much. Painting, I think we could paint this, certainly. But there's not, short of going to kind of a frameless custom lift, which just the cost of the lift is in the $75,000 range. And then plus the installation and everything that goes with that. You know, we're talking about, even this lift is a very expensive proposition for one apartment. And, you know, my client was trying to do the right thing, you know, in his mind, he was doing the right thing. He didn't understand that the process wasn't being followed. So it just, and to the point of relocating the window, of course, we can relocate the windows. The first floor windows, yes, because there's no partition behind it, can be relocated. The issue is there's no patching with this, you know, with this stucco system. It's kind of like, once we move that window, we got to redo the facade. It's just, or it's going to look like it was a patched in area. It's just not going to look right.
But does the window currently align with the upper floor windows?
Yes,
though?
it does. It does. So to
right.
move one without, but I understand what I'm saying, and it's because of the frame to the entry door. But I still think it's a better, I actually think it's better designed to just keep this all in line in the way it is right now.
Okay, other questions? All right, and let me just see if we have any. I think in the tax photo, I just want to confirm in the tax photo, this particular building is the one with the porch, right? It sort of has a Italianate top and then a porch.
Yes, originally, but that wasn't the existing condition that we found.
That's correct. I know it wasn't like that at the time of designation. I'm
Yes.
just trying to understand which one it is in the block.
Yeah. You want to go back?
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll go back.
Okay,
Yep.
it's okay.
Yes, but yes.
Okay, so we can, well, maybe we should go back to your rendering for our discussion. All right, so commissioners, if there are no other questions, we should move along here. I will note that Historic Districts Council also sent a letter which was shared with you all in advance of today. And the last time we saw this, as was presented, the commission was comfortable with the rear yard addition and legalizing the rear yard addition. The majority of the commissioners present were also supportive of the window alignments, mostly because historically they were asymmetrical and it's just a flip, and because the building is no longer a pair, and it's an altered facade, but also within an altered context, and that there's no discernible pattern. I think many of the commissioners were comfortable with the flip of the windows from one side to the other. And I think it was the lift that actually caused most concern for most commissioners. And we asked the applicants to study various alternatives and options for either changing it or integrating it better into the areaway. And so the applicants have presented their options to us today. They're doing a paved surface on the side of the areaway so that the lift isn't sort of overlapping paved and into planted area. The surface is be more uniform, and then installing the stone wall and planters to conceal it. And the applicant has just represented that they could also paint it to help it blend away a little bit more with the existing facade. So we'll begin our discussion. Commissioner Lutfi, I think you were particularly wanting to see the various options and studies for the lift last time. So what are your thoughts today?
I think the whole thing's kind of disappointing. And it's sort of a situation where if we approve, it's just going to be the best of an unfortunate situation. So Yeah, I think that the plantings with the brick wall in the front are very helpful in terms of blocking it. I do think painting it would be a good idea to just try to, maybe it should be a gray. It wouldn't be, I don't know, I would actually, this could conceivably be done well, or it could look very cheap. But maybe there could be like sort of a little wall on the outside of it, like not, like a wooden wall or just something to still obscure that heavy metal side that it has. I really don't know. I am okay with the windows the way they are, and I'm okay with the back, but I still think it need, a little more could be done to help make this look better. I do have one question for you, Sarah, which is, or anybody, like, what is the lifespan of these lifts? Do you know?
I'm not quite sure. I know.
Okay, so listen,
yeah,
I think we've closed the hearing, so.
This is a question to us.
Yeah, this is a question for staff, so I just wanted to.
And the reason why I'm asking is, could we also request that when it, stops working, it be replaced with something a little more appropriate, that won't be so obtrusive?
So and I don't know that we know the lifespan of it. I suspect that they could last a while, although weathering might have an effect on them. But one thought along those lines is thinking about an appropriate compliance. If one didn't find it appropriate, could there be an appropriate compliance date that would give them some time to use this before restudying it? So we can think about that. Let's hear some of the other comments and revisit that. All right. So Commissioner Jefferson, I think last time you were comfortable with the windows. Maybe, I don't know if that's changed at all, but you were really concerned about the lift not being integrated and asked if they could shift it or do something.
So today, looking at this elevation and the door, the handsome door and the window so close to it, really just bothered me somehow. Maybe just today. The lift, last week we saw a beautiful lift that was sunken into the ground somewhat and was less visible and came up out of the ground. It was one of the last projects we saw last week. So I was wondering, in this particular case, because it does have a basement, could it be lowered down a little bit so it'd be less visible? But it doesn't help because from the diagonal, you see this lift. It's just so, yeah, that view. I'm not sure that it would, if you dropped it down a bit, you will still have this view. The only issue is the color, which is difficult to do now, because even if they painted it, it wouldn't work because it's painted in the shop and has that longer life. So I assume just difficult for me that nothing could be done. Nothing. It's just, I have to accept it all. And that was the reason for my somewhat outburst.
Yeah, no, it's very frustrating, and I do appreciate the applicant showing the various alternatives. And I do wonder, I sort of think any lift would be noticeable. And so to your point, even if I'm not sure you could depress it because it would bring you into a different door than the door they're using now. But if there is, and you'd have to excavate and create a door, I think, and then you'd have to get down the lift, you could get into the lift at grade and then go down to a new entry below grade. But even short of that, all of the other alternatives would be there as well. Yeah.
My issue originally was seeing the elevation directly, but even then you could see a bit, but in this case, you're right, it doesn't matter. The lift have to remain because it's very visible from this angle. even though it's at higher,
Yeah,
higher than eye level. So it's what
Yeah.
it is.
I know, it is disappointing. Okay, Commissioner Gustafson?
And the question is, what was my position the first time?
Oh, let me remind myself. So, well, you were not comfortable with the lift and asked them to do more to better integrate the barrier-free access method of getting in, and you actually were not comfortable with the flip in the windows.
Yeah, I thought so. And I don't have to accept it. I think the question again goes back, I think I said this last time, the issue here is what would we have approved in the first instance if it had been brought to us? We are not permitted to consider what the applicant thinks we're going to, which is cost. That is not something that we're allowed to take into account. So I would not have approved the window shift in the first instance, and we would have required an alternative lift. And I know the location we're stuck with, but the design of the lift would have been different, and we were shown today options that were more attractive, less visible. So no, I can't approve this.
Okay, thank you. All right, Commissioner Shamir Barron, I think last time you were comfortable with the windows because they were asymmetrical historically, and because the facade is so altered from its historic condition and in the altered context, but also, actually, I think you also, you were a little more supportive of the lift, but asked if they could shift it. So I don't know how you're feeling now with some of the adjustments they've made.
I sincerely don't remember being finding it acceptable, the windows, but okay. Certainly the point that it's so altered from its original design. What I find, just as I'm listening to everyone's comments, so disturbing is just that it was an architect's and contractor's error and should be fixed. If we do not opine on cost, but there are insurances and so on that deal with errors both in the field and construction and with respect to contract administration. So I do think that this should be fixed because it departed from the original drawings and approved elevations. So that I find that it should be. Now, whether we should agree to accepting that the violation be overlooked is just an issue that I have. I mean, I don't know when we do and when we don't. I mean, I think that Commissioner Gustafson's rule is an appropriate one to follow.
Right.
I just don't know that we
that
always
is
do.
the one. Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I think we are very sympathetic, but we ultimately do have to find it appropriate, so it's not about kind of letting the violation go. We have to actually think about whether we think it's appropriate. And so, in this case, because the facade is so altered from its historic condition, for me personally, the windows were always asymmetrical, that and the context is altered as well. That would be a reason I could find the window shift to be appropriate because it's no longer part of a historic context. But it wouldn't mean that I'm just letting the violation go. It's actually, so you have to really think about it. Would you approve it in the first place? Would you be able to find it appropriate under our standards of appropriateness?
Right. I would not have approved it in the first place. I can agree with you that I could find it appropriate just looking at it today. I mean, there was a more appropriate proposal that we approved that was originally understood to be the agreed upon elevation or not approved, but okay. I think I will have to be with you, Chair Carroll, in seeing this not as just a violation we will overlook, but something that I could accept as appropriate, though not the most appropriate.
Okay. Commissioner Let's see if Anne is back. No. Okay, Commissioner Chapin?
Yeah, I could find the window, the moving the windows appropriate because of the comments you made and the general lack of sort of symmetry on this block to begin with. And I think that they made a reasonable effort to try to obscure the lift. And apparently the lift should have been presented to us and was not, and, I have sympathy for the owner, as was expressed a moment ago. The architect should be, somehow held accountable by someone. But at this point, to have the everything redone would fall on, the owner to accomplish and to get the, obviously change. They'd still have to have a lift of some sort. That they have to have something going on here. And I don't know that the alternatives would be that much better, from what I can see. So it's an extremely unfortunate situation that's going on here, but I think that I can find this appropriate in the circumstances.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Goldblum?
I'm John here on this one.
Oh, you're breaking up.
Hello. Better.
No.
Good. Let's do it. Better. No.
No, it's very, very static, not staticky, but broken up.
That sounds robotic.
And we know Commissioner Goldblum is not robotic.
Yes.
Something
No.
else is going on. I don't think it's just reception.
I don't think it's,
Maybe try and turn off the camera. Sometimes that works.
Better.
You want to try putting on your headphone?
No. Hold on. Right. No. Yeah, it's better.
no, unfortunately, it's not.
Maybe try muting and unmuting.
You want to try logging with your phone?
That's a good idea. And maybe while you try to log in, if you want to try to log in with your phone, I'll move around. Oh. All right, I'm gonna move around. And Michael, can you try to call in with your phone maybe, or? Okay. All right, so let's go over to Commissioner Devonshire.
Thanks, Sarah. If this was a new application, I would not be able to approve it. Thus, I can't approve it.
Okay. Thank you. Commissioner Chen?
I'm sort of, I like Diana's word is unfortunate. But my stand is slightly different, and people know that from before, is that, it's not the highest and best use of the proposed design, is that what we have been able to. So in terms of the asymmetry of the windows, I'm in agreement with Adi and Diana and thing. So let's see how the vote goes.
Okay. All right, thank you. Commissioner Bland?
I guess I'm a softie. I mean, this is all unfortunate, of course, but I can side with what you and Diana and Addie have said, and I think Wellington as well. So I can approve it, but reluctantly, I guess.
All right. And
Can you hear me?
Commissioner Goldblum, we can hear you now. Perfect.
Cool.
I'm with John G on this. We have in the past several times, when confronted with this kind of situation, given the applicant, not given the applicant an approval, but left them with a long period of time for correction. I think that's a much better way to go, frankly, than giving them an approval here, because it's clear that if we apply the Gustafson standard, it would not pass. So I think that that's only fair to those to whom it is applied. In other cases, that we just try to alleviate the burden for them, the practical burden by letting them correct it over an extended period of time. And
All right.
my experience is that every client I've talked to who has one of these lifts says that they always break and they never work, and they're the last ditch solution. So my guess is that they will probably not last too long.
Okay. So I think we have 6 votes to approve it as is, but I know Commissioner Jefferson, you were really struggling with it. And so I just wanted to confirm what do you think in this case you could accept it as you ultimately came around to say, or are you feeling?
I'm listening, my vote is listening to John, so.
Okay. All right, so maybe what we could do is an approval. I think I have the 6 votes for the windows, so maybe we could do an approval of the rear and the windows and a denial of the lift with a long compliance date to be worked out with the staff. So let me go ahead and see if I can make that work. Okay, in the matter of docket number 21-00794, 418A Lewis Avenue in Bedford-Stuyvesant, expanded Stuyvesant Heights Historic District, and an altered row house built circa 1870 to 71. This is an application to legalize work completed in non-compliance with the Landmarks Preservation Commission permit, including alterations at the front facade and areaway, and the construction of a rear yard addition. And I note that the building that the building was highly altered prior to designation and by work done under Certificate of Appropriateness 19-17191. I recommend approval in part, finding that the fenestration pattern on this building was not historically symmetrical, and the building is not part of a cohesive row, and the facade is significantly altered, and therefore the slight shifting of the window bays did not call undue attention to itself or detract from this highly eclectic streetscape. That while the original commission approved plans erroneously showed a neighboring house extending further into the green space, 418A Lewis Avenue is located toward the end of the block, where its deep rear yard is cut off from the central green space by a larger apartment building on Decatur Street, and therefore the presence of an addition of this length did not substantially diminish the central green space. That the rear yard addition is visible only from limited points outside of the boundaries of the historic district through an opening in the street wall on Bainbridge Street to the south, and that while the design is the same, the previously presented rendering showed it projecting less deeply into the yard. And that these 2 aspects of the proposal do not detract from the altered nature of this facade, and or from the central green space. And with respect to the lift, I recommend denial, finding that that the lift is highly visible, and its solid walls and its location obscure the facade and call attention to itself in the streetscape, and recommend that they continue to study alternative method of achieving barrier-free access. And in the meantime, the applicant and the staff will work together to establish a compliance date by which to correct this work, the lift, which we'll be denying. Okay, so Commissioner Shamir Barron, would you second that motion?
Second.
All right. Mark, or John, I'm not sure.
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Barron,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Devonshire,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson,
Nay.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi.
Aye.
9 in favor, 1 opposed, the motion passes.
All right, so please continue to work with the staff as we determine the best compliance date and resolution for the areaway lift. All right, so we are well behind schedule. It's 1:20. We will return from lunch at 1:50, and we'll resume with the rest of the public meeting items. And we will ask all members of the public who are in the meeting to voluntarily exit the meeting at this time, so that should you wish to return, you won't have technical difficulties that you might have if we have to remove you. So we'll ask everybody to exit the meeting, and we'll see everybody at 1:50. Thank you.